Good morning. Good morning. Can you feel the chill in the air? I don't know. Oh, I see thumbs down on that. What? Winter is coming. I don't see any sweaters out there today.
Sweater weather.
Yes, indeed. So, good morning and welcome to the Polk County School Board's work session. We will now call the work session for October 14th to order. Now, I do have a couple jokes for us today. So, here's my first one. What's a skeleton's least favorite room? The living room. Ha ha ha. Okay. Now, we do have a little break, that's just right around the corner, so I thought this one was timely as well. So, why don't mummies take time off? Because they're afraid to unwind. All right, so yeah, that was a good one. I like that one better than the first one. I don't have any more this morning. Yeah. I love it. All right, so I just want to say thanks to our staff as you're all lined up back there. I appreciate your availability and accessibility to us as we work through our agenda today. We're definitely humbled to serve alongside the most educated workforce in the United States and the most dedicated workforce as well. I would like to start by reading our Who Are We statement. And it goes like this. We are the Polk County Leadership and Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and our experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team would be: 1, operating with integrity; 2, respecting our students, our staff, families, and each other; 3, establishing a culture where stakeholders feel valued, they're supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth; and then 4, supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. And then collectively, we need to work on behalf of the students that we serve and find these avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There's no acceptable alternative to that. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because when we remain committed to supporting the whole child, that's going to happen. And we hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to lead us in our work session today.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, staff, and community members. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Linda King, Senior Director for Risk Management and Employee Benefits, and she has the first item before us today on open enrollment communication plan.
Good morning, Board Chair, Board members, and Superintendent Hyde and staff. It's open enrollment time. How many of you have gotten either a recorded message, an email, have seen it on social media? We've done quite a much larger campaign than what we had done last year, all really to the credit of my director, Lisa Hollis. And as you probably know, the change to Fleet came so quickly that we did not have time to get a company in place to help us with communications. So that's why you see us working closely with PR and all of our other partners to put together our own campaign again this year. But next year, we will have a much more robust team and planning time ahead of time to help us with that. Do you have any questions for me related to, I gave you like a list of the items as far as what we were targeting that we worked with PR on, as well as a timeline. Lisa, do you want to add anything?
No, just we're trying to hit the sweet spot of communicating enough so everyone can see it across several modes of communication. We know not everyone is tied to their email every day, while some are, and we know some are more on social media. We know some see posters in the workplace, so we've tried to hit all of the ways the variety of our employees would know about open enrollment. And we also provided a PowerPoint with to date, what we have done, what avenues of communication have been taken, and projected all the way out through October 25th.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you. Good morning, ladies. As most of you know, I serve on the Health Strategy Committee, and I want to thank Ms. Linda and her team and Public Relations for doing, to me, a very good job of highlighting the open enrollment. I received a text. I know I did personally. I don't know about the other board members, what they were able to receive, but I've seen a lot of information. And so I know that the effort is stronger this year than previously, and that was one of the things that I shared in the committee meetings, that the board wanted to have strong communication and make sure that folks knew well in advance. And I think that that is the goal that the team has been working towards. So I wanted to just thank you all for your efforts.
Ma'am, we appreciate it.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. Well, this is definitely better than last year's, because last year's was essentially non-existent. I still am very frustrated because a year ago when we sat here, we talked about having an extended time period, that 2 weeks is really not enough for open enrollment. It should be a full month. And we were assured that was going to happen, which clearly it's only 2 weeks. I spent half the day on the phone yesterday with several issues of either someone on our team couldn't answer. The email that went out last night says that meetings are only available in person at the district office if you need help to sign up. And oh yeah, they're only available during school hours. So if any of our teachers or school-based personnel need to set an appointment, they're supposed to come to the district office during the workday to do so. So I still have many concerns. One of them being that it's October 14th and open enrollment started 3 days ago, and we're just having this conversation, that this should have been presented to us in August or September, which, again, when I was going back through my open enrollment emails talking about this last year, that was one of the requests that we were assured would be happening. I'm thrilled that we're looking at a marketing team, but we had that conversation a year ago, and so I'm going to argue that a year is plenty of time. And I know that you were not on board yet at that point, Lisa, and that you have been key to getting some of this done this year. But a year is quite a bit of time to be able to have a much more robust campaign and get some of those things satisfied. So I still have lots of concerns. I've shared some of those with the superintendent. And I know he'll be working with the team to address many of those. But I want to make sure it's on the record again that the plan for open enrollment should come to us in August or September, not after open enrollment has started. My last question is, I know we have started doing the fairs around the county. The first one was on Saturday. What was the attendance at Elbert, and what is the breakdown between people working it versus people actually attending?
I think we had 5 or 6 staff members there, and we had about 68 employees that signed in. So actually, it was very good for the first weekend. And it was obvious that people had gotten the message, and a lot of people also registered for screenings, much higher than what we've had in the past. So I think it was a great start. We traditionally have more attendance in Lakeland and Jim Miles, which is usually the last weekend.
Okay.
And as to your comments, I guess, about the other things, we've got Quantum also available, and we did use Quantum's 800 number this year as well as on communications, and we've trained that team extensively so people can chat with a Quantum rep when they have like a planning period, or call and ask questions. And I know we've fielded quite a few questions, so we are available more than just necessarily, and that's why we've tried to cover the district on those Saturday mornings, and tried to offer alternatives for folks.
So just so you know, Quantum is not able to, until they are actually enrolled, what they are telling people is that they are not able to help. So if you are not on our insurance plan currently, they cannot answer plans about it for next year. So if you're on your spouse's insurance right now and just calling to ask questions, they are not providing those answers. So that may be something that we
We'll
need to
address
work
that.
on with.
We'll address that because they do have the plan design and all of that information that they can help with. I mean, verifying that the person is an employee is first paramount, but we'll look into that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Fields. Oh, sorry, Mr. Keys, I apologize.
Okay. So I didn't have the fortune or maybe the misfortune of being involved in the process last year, having not been on the board at it yet, but I will tell you that I did receive multiple communications. So kudos to you and your team for putting that out. And I felt like, at least from what I've seen at this point, that the communication was very well. Received multiple notifications. And I want to say thank you also for having those fairs in different locations throughout the county, because I've seen correspondence on other events where it said, yeah, we're going to offer events, and they're usually got one in Bartow and we got one in Lakeland. And I'm like, hey, what happened to the east side of the county? So thank you for doing that. I see the next one is at Haines City and on Saturdays to make them accessible. So just thank you for that.
Ms. Fields, I apologize.
No problem. I don't remember, Ms. Wyatt, the 30-day window that you requested last year. I have made a note of it this year. In conversating during the committee meetings, I thought that there would be options for employees if they had questions or concerns at the health and benefits fair. That's what I thought. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that. And I know that everybody's not going to go to that, but I thought that was an option along with what you were saying. So I think, again, communication is key, and I know that it might not be 100%, but it's much better than it was this time last year. And so I'm sure that the superintendent will make a note of it, and as well as I, or Ms. Linda, that 30-day window, and you want it to come in August, the conversation. I don't remember that request either. So I think we just have to make a note of it and work to meet the needs of everyone's concerns. That's what I would say.
Thank you. So there's a couple things that we'll address. We'll talk about extending the timeline, whether there's current restrictions to do so during this time period, or ensuring that there's a 30 to 45-day timeline for the next round. The other issues that have brought to my attention, not only by Ms. Wyatt, but by others, is our customer service concerns, that when individuals are contacting risk management, they're not getting the answers they need, or they feel like they're being dismissed, or it's not a professional, courteous phone call. Lastly is the availability of staff. I know that we have asked them to schedule times, but I have expressed this before. We're here all day. I don't care what everybody else is doing. If teachers want to schedule a virtual meeting, it does not have to be in person. If they want to schedule a virtual meeting with staff, then you need to accommodate that. And that needs to start. So we will re-message different options and communication, because the whole point here is to support our staff with their healthcare needs and their healthcare initiatives, our healthcare initiatives. So we'll be talking about that more later, but you have heard, the communication process, which is why I wanted you to present it, is much better. But there are still some areas where members are expressing concerns, employees are expressing concerns, and quite frankly, some of these things are things that we talked about last year that we should have put in place. So, so thank you, board members, for your feedback. And staff members who may be listening to today's workshop or maybe watching at a later date, please make sure you're opening those emails. You're looking at the opportunities that have been scheduled for you, but there will be a follow-up email basically explaining what you have. Here are some other options during the day that you can call. Here are some ways you can schedule a meeting, those kinds of things. So we'll talk later, and then we'll vet that message, and we'll get that out as soon as possible. Thank you. There are no further questions or comments.
All right, thank you, sir.
Board members, this will be more of an abbreviated presentation. You received a lot of this information during the retreat. But I did want Ms. Collins and Mr. McNaughton to have an opportunity to, provide a summary of Goal Area 1 initiatives that have been concluded and those that have been extended, added, or needed to be modified. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everybody.
I know, Honorable Board
We
Chair.
look forward to coming and speaking in front of you. I don't know if you like to see us, but We were hoping we didn't get the hook and get pulled today, so it's good to see everybody.
This is like the sequel from the board retreat. So we talked about a lot of data last time. So this is actually focusing in on, well, maybe,
Just kidding. Okay.
oh,
No, not open
open
enrollment.
enrollment. Okay, with goal one, the strategic plan, but also talk about some of the new initiatives that we have this year to really increase our student outcomes. So for goal one, we do have 4 objectives. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through just a highlight and where we are regarding to it. So the first one is increasing academic outcomes and attainment. And so this is really our instructional alignment to our Florida best standards. So we're looking for a 5%, our KPI is a 5% increase from the 23-24 school year to the 25-26. So this year and then last year. But I wanted to show you where we are, the previous 2-year gap. So if you take a look, in that time we have an over 8% increase in English language arts, over 7 in science, over 4 in math, and at over 10% in social studies. So just saying, we want to get better each year. So just showing you where we are measured to that, the KPI where we're looking for. So we're looking at increasing those growth, but just to say where we're at. So
The fundamental piece here that I think it's important we underscore, this is really due to a very strong vision that Mr. Green and Mr. Hyde set forth for us 4.5 years ago around getting the right what in front of kids. This all started with us changing our planning protocols and our planning supportive teachers, and we continue that. We are confident. Not only do we continue it, we're expanding it. We will continue to see sustained growth there because this isn't cohort data. This is absolutely intentional, and that's why I think we can attribute to see the increases that we have.
right now, actually, we've been working on actual curriculum. And I mean curriculum, all the resources, almost like day-by-day lessons that teachers can use. And they can, add materials to it to fit their teaching styles, but the materials are all there, place for it. By the end of next year, all tested content areas and all tested grade levels and courses will have all this material for it. So.
We spent some time at the retreat talking about graduation. Obviously, we're very, very proud of this. And I think at that time I shared that a lot of this was due to intentionality around data and data entry, making sure withdrawal codes were correct. But also the schools have done a yeoman's job and a heavy lift around intentionally targeting kids early, around making sure that they have the tools and the support to be able to graduate. And we've seen some schools already had very high graduation rates, and they challenged themselves to continue to grow. And then some that really struggled, we have been able to support them with some systems to make sure that truly no child's left behind, and we get very granular. And we're excited about that. One thing I would like to point out here is give our AA&E team a big shout out. They created a dashboard. And so principals and school personnel can go in, monitor what it's looking like around graduation rate for all of their cohorts and get down granular to kids. And that has been a big tool of help for us around that.
Okay, the next one is talking about increasing number of students with industry certification and endorsements. And this is just one of the staggering facts. Down at the bottom of the data, if you take a look at the 23-24 school year to the last school year, the increase is supposed to be 3%. That's what we're aiming for. And it was like 40% increase over the previous 2 years. So we're well on the way. So what happens, we started putting structures in place and also deals with the counseling of students to make sure they stay in the programs. And that's so important. One of the things that we are working with, we'll talk about one of our initiatives, is our college and career acceleration. We didn't really see much movement this past year, but what happened is also with industry certification, it's also a lagging effect. So we're going to be reaping those benefits for years to come.
Hang on,
Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Miller.
Oh, I could have waited, but thank you, because
No,
I'll
no
probably
problem.
come up with something else by the time you finish.
You are okay.
I appreciate that and the work that's been done in industry certifications and endorsements. Recently, we've had some conversations with students with IEPs and 504s that are looking to complete these certifications and endorsements. And I would like to see the data because I think it'll show that we've increased in that area, but I also think we have a lot of work to do on access for those things. So I would like to see the data on that maybe at the next time when we look at this to see how we've increased those opportunities for young people as they go to post-secondary experiences.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
And that data request is going to require some time because it's not disaggregated that way, as you know.
Correct.
And we're going into PM2, so you and I can talk about a timeline, and Ms. Miller made it very graciously said, the next time we're discussing this, so I'll bring it back as an update, probably second semester.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, and then our last one, and I think we touched on this at the retreat as well, is that we are focused on increasing the number of students that not just get into these courses, but they actually complete programs. So I don't just take culinary, I take culinary and I'm a program completer. And you can see there that some of the data is not complete, obviously because this is a lag component, but Ms. Bennett and her team, especially around academies, have become very, very intentional and are doing a better job tracking the data. And so we're excited to see that those increases will reveal themselves.
And just to make sure, concentrators means that it's like they complete 2 or 3 in a sequence where the completers complete all of the requirements for it. So just, so we're working to have more completers.
So this is really why we're excited to be here today. We want to tell you a little bit about our way of work. I think I mentioned this as well. You always wonder, like, when you see Joe, do you see Tracy? And when do you see Tracy? Why do you see Joe? Our way of work is, again, very intentional, something we shifted to 4.5 years ago. Teaching and learning used to do anything that had to do with teaching and learning. And Division of Schools just kind of did schools, and we did a lot of supervision stuff and operational stuff. And about 4.5 years ago, we came and we said, you know what? Teaching and learning can really work on curriculum, scope and sequence, materials. Instruction needs to sit with Division of Schools. And so at that time, we embarked on an effort to work intentionally around those things and then collaboratively. That's how we've grown our instructional leadership on our school side, because the fact of the matter is the principals, the assistant principals, and the coaches that are in the building need to be able to support that. They need to understand what good instruction looks like every day, so teachers are getting the support. And then Joe and his team do a phenomenal job providing us with the on-grade level resources and interventions that we need to get the job done. That's our secret sauce. And so we feel in the past 4.5 years, we have reached a point of stability and growth. And so now we're at the place where we can look at, how do we just really get great? Instead of always being in reactive mode, like, oh, we have all these turnaround schools, and now we're just really have a very clear vision of where we're going. And I'm not going to belabor this too much, but I think it's important. Joe and I had an opportunity this year to read a book, and I think I had shared this with Dr. Allen at graduation, and it's called Infinite Game, if anyone's looking for a good read. And it basically had nothing to do with education, had everything to do with organizations and mindsets around, there are finite games that you can win, and then there's infinite games, things you don't win. Like, you don't win education, and you don't win life. Like, he won life. No one says that at your funeral. But those kinds of games, the goal is just to get better every day. And Joe and I are old, as Mr. Hyde likes to remind me. Been here a long
That's
time.
not true.
Yeah, you said it yesterday.
I said, who has the longest tenure?
Yes. Translation, old. And Joe and I very much sunk into this book because our whole goal at this point in our career is just to make Polk awesome and build those systems so that when we're long gone, everything can continue. And that's what the premise of this book is about. And so with that, we sat down in the spring and said, what are 4 focus areas that we can look to that we're not going to solve overnight? We're not going to win Algebra 1 overnight. But that we know is an Achilles heel for us. And so what can we do to start to bring our teams together to focus on 4 different areas that every year, even if it's incremental, we're just getting better. And so we identified those areas.
And so what we did during a retreat for DOS and TNL, we have co-leads. It's always a regional paired with the senior director from TNL. And so we pair them together, and what happened is we have members of the team. Every time we have a DOS and TNL meeting, 2 of these areas report out. How are we monitoring? What's going on? What do they need? And so we're just happy to share with this. The first one is Algebra 1. If you take a look at our data, I know Superintendent Hyde has been very critical, and we're not satisfied where we're at, and we're going to get better. So the idea is to improve. So what we have is double blocking Algebra 1, and you get data. So instead of having Algebra 1A, for instance, for our struggling high school students, Algebra 1A and then Algebra 1B the next year, combine it into a double block, but also use research. One of the things that we did 4.5 years ago was something called the New Teacher Project. It was something, the opportunity myth. And that generally said students were succeeding, but they weren't succeeding on grade level or on course level material. And that was the basis of our success, what we based our whole last 4 years on. There's a new study they did about algebra, the Algebra Project. And so we've started taking a look at it. So we started basing off of these indicators and so we created ladder lessons to fill in the gaps before we build on top of it. So it's not that we're teaching below grade level. What we're doing is we're getting the skills caught up and then carrying it through to the current benchmark. So it's not like, oh, this is just pre-algebra, but we realize some of these indicators go all the way down to kindergarten. And if they miss a certain skill, we build it up, and it's student specific. It's not like we're teaching the whole class. So there's a pre-test, we find out what their needs are, we teach it, we scaffold it up, and then we go on from it. So we're really excited about it. But to do this, we chose pilot schools. So we have 4 middle school, 4 high school, and there's one of the documents from the board retreat that goes by each of your areas, each of your districts, which schools are participating in which projects. So we're really excited about this one. Generally what happened is we had to re-envision Algebra 1. So we redid the Algebra 1 curriculum. And it's not just saying we just added more problems or new tasks. Actually, we had a new philosophy of how to teach it. So we come with a lot more instructional pathways for it and provided the resources to go along with it. Our team, as I said, DOS and TNL, they go on calibration walks. They go walk with the administrators. Say they have weekly or bi-weekly walks with these pilot classrooms. So they're not just saying, well, I hope this works and we'll find out at the end of the year. They're actually working in the classrooms with the teachers for this. And then they're going through all the data. Like we've had these unit assessments that some have used, some have not. The increase on the number of students taking these unit assessments is just remarkable, and they're sort of like mini EOCs. They're on the computer. They have the same item types, and so we're following along with that all year.
Okay, and another area that we know that we can just get better every day is around serving students and families of ESE students. And so you can see our objective is obviously to increase the performance index. If you look at the ESSA Federal Performance Index, the expectation is that all subgroups achieve it at 41% or better. And so we have some schools, a lot of schools, actually not meeting that specifically for some of our subgroups. One of those subgroups being students with disabilities, which is why we chose this. And Mr. Hyde and I have been having many conversations along with Ms. Williams and her team, like, where are we missing the mark? Why are we falling so short? People will go, well, you know, it's students with, well, every district has that. Why do we stand out against some of our benchmarks districts? And through some probing questions of his, we really realized we haven't done a necessarily great job of supplying all the teachers and school-based administrators with the tools they need to get the job done that we expect them to do. And so at Mr. Hyde's direction, we have worked really closely. Tammy and her team have taken the lead. We are doing a professional learning series with our administrators, all of our principals, and then another version of it with our assistant principals. We did the first one last month. They're 2 hours, and it was by far, and I've been here 30 years, the very best professional development we've ever done for school-based leaders around students with disabilities. We taught them LRE. Many of them didn't know LRE, which is least restrictive environment. They certainly didn't know how to pull it. And so again, we can sit in judgment, or we can provide them the tools. And so that's what we're doing around that initiative. And I couldn't be more excited. So a lot of it is just identifying roles and responsibilities, making sure that the district is aligned with what school-based need is, that professional learning, which is key, and it has to start at the top of the school so that expectations can be understood and monitored. If we expect people to meet what we expect, we have to be really clear around what that is, and then the accountability as well. So that will, again, not be something we win overnight, but I guarantee you we will be better at the end of this year than when we started.
Okay, the next one.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
And this is also for future planning, and I think the superintendent and I have talked about this. You're right, a lot of these people came up without any experience in any subgroup, which is unfortunate. But I think in the past, they would get assigned a role like an AP, or maybe somebody, a dean may have more information. And I think, and you can remind me of what we're doing now, but I think when I talked to Mr. Green, this was a part of the Ignite program, some kind of training. So that training that you talked about that was so useful, I wonder if we could, I think they were doing APs. I don't know if that's right, Superintendent, but this training may be something we can add to that to try to bring to the leaders that we're going to send out to these schools if they're not in these pilot schools.
Well, everyone that's in Ignite is either sitting as a principal, sitting as an AP, or is working at the district, and those people in Ignite do come to our principals meetings.
Okay.
And so I'm most excited about this right here because I feel like in the time I've been here, this is a substantial game changer for our school leaders and our I just think understanding is going to spring us into really positive action. I do.
And the other part of that is 2 hours is great. If that, I've always wanted it someplace they could get to and they could access it, because sitting in their office, when they have something come up, I want them to be able to go to a
100%.
resource.
And it's 2 hours every other month, and then on the off months, they have school-based tasks they have to do.
Okay.
Like, not to go too far into it, because I don't want to drag this out for you,
Yeah.
but we can talk. We talked about least restrictive environment. We had them kind of say, what do you think your LRE is? Many of them were, I don't know. Then they pulled it, and then one of the things they have to do is they had to take a sample of 25 kids and go match their IEP with what their screen is showing. And we are seeing a lot of times in focus what it's showing. There's such a mismatch. I'll be honest with you, to just be really vulnerable, a lot of them have no idea what the IEPs say or how to access those or read those. And again, we're not going to sit in judgment. We're gonna train them. And so that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Well, and I'm going to add to that because this is not just an administrative function. And many of our classroom teachers are not performing their statutory obligation either. So when asked, at last Friday, I had the opportunity to ask our assistant principals to raise their hands and tell me if their school has an explicit process at their campus at the start of each year where they require teachers to sit down or provide them time to sit down and review the IEPs that are showing up as red folders on their enrollment rosters. If you had to guess how many hands were raised out of 110, how many hands would somebody guess? I heard 6, 10.
Lower.
4. Now, here's what's happening, though. So administrators are assuming at times that our instructional staff are doing what we've always assumed. When I was a classroom teacher at the beginning of every school year, before school even started during pre-planning, you were required to schedule time to go into the CUME room. We didn't have it all electronically like we do today. You had to go into the CUME folder room because it's illegal to take those files out of that room. And you had to sit there and you pulled every file and you read through every student's IEP or 504 or BIP. I'm going to throw the BIP in there too because that's one of the issues. And you made notes. You made notes about generally what are your best instructional strategies to meet the needs of all learners, and then you learned specifically what are some individual needs that students may have. That's not happening. So the number one complaint that we typically get about students with disabilities in their IEP or their 504 specifically is about parents' frustration with the lack of implementation of what they believe is outlined in the IEP. And so if we're not reading them, we're not preparing for the year for them, then I would have to argue that, yes, that's a deficiency as well. So this is not just an administrator's deficiency or an opportunity for improvement. I shouldn't say deficiency. These administrators are highly skilled, highly qualified, but they've got to understand the process so they can manage the process and inspect the process more frequently. So I'm pleased with the progress we've made. We worked very diligently over the summer to develop the training guide, identify the most important topics for this year's focus going into Summer Institute, and then you'll see another round of this. This will continue to be an explicit training that our school administrators and others will have. And then we will have further conversations about how to address the pre-start of school requirements for staff to have to review the IEPs and 504s and BIPs, behavior intervention plans for their students. So, thank you.
I'm still on, I'm still on. On that, I just want to say that if it was this is where I want to, in defense of some of the teachers, which coming in thinking they all know what to do and they don't. But when we have processes in some schools that were not recorded. So back, I forgot what we call them now. We used to call them LEAs. Tell me again, there's something else.
Facilitators.
Yes. Okay, when we changed that model and we shared them between schools, you had some of those people filling in that role where they would make a sheet for every student, and especially the schools, elementary schools that maybe only had a few, not 300 like a high school would have, they got it to the teacher. This is the sheet about this student. You understand what his needs are. But that wasn't ever written as part of their job. You just had a few of them doing that. And I think it became, like sometimes happens, the procedure people believe is just how it will go, and it kind of lacks. Because I remember those rooms and signing those folders to look at them. But if you had somebody else doing that for you and then that went away, I don't know that we have a procedure in writing. We just had some people doing things that were working.
And honestly, that's also part of the great PD that we're doing. Very good, candid conversations. We want to hear this. We didn't create this PD with Ms. Williams for the whole year. Like, it will evolve as their needs are revealed. That did come up at the last PD about, we used to have these. That was a big thing because then teachers had it right there. So that's.
I want to be clear here. That's never coming back. That is a responsibility of each individual instructional staff to sit there, and for us to ever have assumed that we should spoon feed everything to everyone. That's not appropriate. This is an instructional responsibility. It's within their licensure. It is a statutory responsibility. And so while somebody should help, and that's why we're training our administrators to monitor to ensure that it's been done, the obligation's on staff, and it always has been and always will be.
And back then, it was because, to Mr. Hyde's point, you had to go to the cum room and pull the hard copy. We don't have to do that anymore. And so part of this training is going to be about, how can I access that information from a classroom level to a facilitator level to an administrator level, because it's all right there at their fingertips. So thank you for that.
Okay, our next one is dealing with our English language learners. Again, very similar to what Tracy just talked about with our students with disabilities. We have our pilot schools. Each of these pilot schools are on year 6 of being under the 41 percentile on ESSA. So for this, again, I cannot brag on Sandy and her team for AA. Just creating these spreadsheets and dashboards that we can look at. What happened is the team got together and they started taking a look at learning gains. We had proficiency, but started taking learning gains in mathematics and ELA and and we could filter down to our ELLs and how they're performing. And so we started finding out some things about especially the schools that were not meeting the ESSA subgroup. So what happens, they came together, started doing some trainings, and really it's a two-pronged attack. In elementary, it's really focused around imagining learnings, the language and literacy, and in secondaries, the we to can do descriptors. And so the team came together. It's not just the ESOL team, it's the DOS and TNL team on this are leading this. So started going through, already started over the summer, started to do the training right away. I mean, we had almost hit the brakes on, hey, let's do our plan first. Let's not just jump into this. They were so excited about it, but they got such a good response from schools that other schools wanted to start joining in on this. So it's success breeds success. They really are hungry for it. And so we started going through, just started doing the monitoring. I think that's a big key. If we're not monitoring it, we're not inspecting it, how are we going to expect greatness and to get better? So they've already started doing their plans for the year. They're going to be doing monitoring at these schools, how they're doing, but they're walking hand in hand with the schools. It's not just, hey, you came to one training, congratulations, I hope this works. It's an ongoing process, and just as with ESE, the professional learning is going to evolve to the needs of each school. And that's what we've started seeing already. And one of the small keys, the ELA curriculum that I talked about earlier, what they've started doing is they started putting in these we to can do descriptors within the curriculum. And they start highlighting them different. So it says, hey, if you want a different teaching strategy that may reach a different learner or may have a student with need, it's highlighted already in the teacher notes in the curriculum. So we started working with one with the other.
And then finally, K2. K2, if you know about accountability, there's nothing graded in K2. But we pay for it in grade 3. And so, again, because we're not in that on fire mode that we have been for so many years before, it gives us a time to go, let's look at K2 and let's have some expectations and some supports around K2. One of the things we noticed when we looked at our walking tool, very, very few walks were happening in K2. That's where we're teaching children to read. That's where we're teaching them numeracy. But we're finding because of the accountability system, our school administrators aren't in there as much, no fault of their own, to support that very, very critical learning stage in our kids' lives. And so we are working specifically with a group of schools here, and we targeted those that tend to have very low proficiency in 3rd grade to say, if we scale up some support and some expectations around K2, and we can monitor that a little closer, will we see that pay dividends? And again, just always trying to, how can we get better and better? When we were on fire, we just focused on 3-5. Those were the teachers we focused on. Those were the planning we focused on. And really, it's just an expansion of what we've been doing down to the K2 level.
And one of the nice things, for the first time, when we got PM1 data, we included the K2 data too, to start seeing what's going on with that, to make sure we start looking for trends in there. So we're looking truly at the full testing in PM1. And that is it.
That's it.
Mr. Sharpless?
Excellent. I was waiting to the end because I just have a list. I just started making a list of questions. So I'm going to start with the most recent thing that you talked about and work my way up to the beginning. So for me, Algebra 1 is something that we've highlighted. I really like the unit assessment data. I'm just going to tell you that. I think you can't improve what you don't measure. And if we're constantly measuring that, I think that's important. One thing you mentioned, and I just wanted to make sure I had a clarity on this. We are no longer doing Algebra 1A and Algebra 1B, correct?
We are, but what we're doing is we're double blocking 1A.
So instead of doing it over 2 years, we're doing it over 1 year.
And they get 2 credits of mathematics in 1 year.
Okay.
And so,
And the point I'm thinking, that's a good thing, because to me, I'm thinking, all right, the old model of Algebra 1A and 1B, but we're doing it over 2 years. When they get to that EOC, you're asking kids to remember something that happened over a year ago. And I could see where there's some loss there. Double blocking it like that, I think, is going to hopefully help our assessment data there. So want to say kudos to that and the unit assessment. Going back to the grad rate, one we looked at, I know that's a lagging indicator. We've talked about that many times. I just want to know when should we expect the grad rate?
Like November-ish, December-ish.
November.
Always
Or
November?
ne-
Okay.
November.
Thank you. I just wanted a refresher there. And the last thing, I really like that idea of make Polk awesome. You mentioned this a little bit in the ESC, but there's two ways to really make an analysis. And, I just taught this lesson in my financial analysis part of agribusiness management in my class. And so you can do what we call a trend analysis or a comparative analysis. And so I think we're doing a really good job at the trend analysis, knowing where we were and where we are. And one thing you mentioned, the ESC is comparing us to surrounding districts or like-sized districts or peers. And so I would personally like to see on this some more comparative analysis as well, because again, we can't control what the other districts do, and I understand that, but I do like to have just a thermometer of where we are. Are other districts around us improving at the same rate? That kind of thing. Which, again, I know you guys have a lot you're doing, and so I'm not, just like Superintendent Hyde said earlier, this isn't something that we're expecting. I'm not making a demand or anything. I'm just saying I think it would be important for us in the future to just have that comparative analysis with the trend analysis, because it's obviously that we're trending in the right direction.
I'll go back, Board Vice Chair Sharpless, because I do believe I provide a comparative analysis each year when our test data comes in. We don't do it with PM. I don't think we have access to other districts' PM data, but for progress monitoring purposes. But I do believe each year when I provide the summary, Sandy does a good job of comparing us to the Big Seven. I don't typically do it with surrounding districts because we're not similar size or similar in demographics as many of our surrounding districts, but the Big Seven we are. So I'll go back and look, and if that wasn't included this year, I apologize, because I typically do it, make sure that I include that so you know how we're performing, and that's where the concern about the fact that we're lagging in algebra performance in 9th and 10th grade by almost 30 percentage points compared to our peer groups is alarming. Because again, they're teaching the same kids we are, same lowest quartile kids, same kids who struggle with math in middle school, same kids with disabilities, same kids who are in gen ed, same kids who come from poverty. There's a demographic there, and we're all teaching the same kids, except some people are just simply outperforming us. And that's the stimulus. We've been talking about this now for a while, and I'm glad to see the changes that we worked hard and implemented over the summer. They were very proactive in helping to address that.
And I would just like to see that for all those objectives, like, for example, the industry certs too, and all the ones we have, just comparative analysis. And again, like you said, probably like-sized districts is the best way to do that. Thank you, sir.
Chair Allen?
Thank you, Superintendent. Just like, Vice Chair, I was waiting till the end as well. And then at the very beginning, you mentioned this is a sequel. So I think there's some great sequels out there. Empire Strikes Back, The Dark Knight, and Maverick as well, Top Gun. There's some great. So this was a great sequel. Appreciate your energy today as well. And I think I mentioned this during our retreat as well, but the sectors or the career pathways that contributed to that most growth. And again, from 5,500 to 9,000, remarkable growth. So I was just curious if that's, tied to those student program concentrators. So I appreciate the clarity too between the concentrator and then the completers as well. So, sectors that really contributed to the most growth within the career pathways, I would be interested in. And then secondly, again, the pilots, I appreciate the energy and, your vision around that as well. And by the way, I'm gonna read that book as well. It's on my list. There's a couple in between. But mid-year indicators. And I was just curious, Superintendent, if we'll get some type of a mid-year indicator on the pilots that you're rolling out. And then if there's like a vision to include the non-pilot schools earlier than, just more of a hard start next year. So if we're seeing those, trends within the pilot initiatives from a mid-year, can we include some of those early on? I don't know if there's a vision for that, to roll in some PD for the non-pilot schools at a particular timeline if you're seeing success.
Well, for instance, for the algebra, it's actually available for all schools. They're just doing the monitoring at the pilot schools. So we can always look at that. And as I said, each meeting that we do, the team comes together and actually goes through all the data of where they're at. So yeah, we can get definitely updates.
We meet every other Friday for all day. And so we have every other Friday when we meet, 2 groups go, and we spend a great deal of time that they give us progress, any data they have coming out, and then collaboratively as the whole team, and there's about 22 of us in the room, something like that. We all work together, and then we continue to push through. And so we do it with pilots so that we can fix it along the way and then hopefully scale it up. But as he said, we're not holding back the resources and in any of these are touching all schools, but the intentionality and the monitoring is around these pilot schools.
Yeah.
So when the board gets their mid-year update, probably mid to late January, PM data, when PM2 data comes in, we'll be able to provide you an analysis of.
Absolutely.
As I did, I sent you the PM1 data that was district-wide, but also school-specific, so you could look at your schools. And then obviously, there'll be a highlight on our 5 top, or our 2 top schools, but our 5 low-performing school, D schools, to show their progress. And one of the things that Tracy's done, based off some feedback and conversation I've had, having attended some DOS meetings in the past, is they're moving conversations away from feelings to justifying it with data. So when somebody's doing a share out about their schools, and I'm sitting there and I hear somebody say, well, I feel it's improving, I think, I believe, no. I think those are great things to talk about at the end, but I want to see the data. And I want to see how you're measuring that feeling as a demonstrable outcome, because feelings are what gets us in trouble. We really need to make sure we're substantiating and validating our positions on things. And so it's a really good shift to have them be able to validate their thoughts in particular about how their schools are performing. And there's a lot of things that they monitor there. There's a lot of conversations that take place beyond just the academics, because academics doesn't happen in isolation. It happens as a result of an effective school climate, as a result of, adequacy in staffing. It results from a lot of different things. So it's a good opportunity for them to advocate too for their schools based off needs and patterns and trends that they see emerging, so we can address them before it becomes a critical need. So very proud of the DOS teams and the meetings that they hold, and these 2 are doing a great job. Our principals meetings are phenomenal. The focus on data, focus on instructional strategies, but rather than being sit and get, they get a lot of table talk time with peer groups, and there's a lot of feedback, and they're very intentional in their practices. So even when they do their breakouts, the regionals and others are walking around, listening into tables, becoming thought partners with tables, and then they identify staff to say, hey, I'm going to call on you because that was a really good thing you guys said. So there's a forced share out there too, which is good, because some people are a little shyer than others. So thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you. I really do enjoy the Joe and Tracy show. It is nothing puts a smile on my face at our 9 a.m. meetings, like having you guys come present. But the enthusiasm that the 2 of you have as leaders of these departments really does trickle down. And we can, I at least as one board member, can feel it when we're entering our schools and they're starting to talk more about instructional walks and things like that, that just the excitement of getting back to education. I know Superintendent Hyde, even since he got here, we've said, one day we're going to get to talk about educating kids again and not transportation or, school safety and all of the other things that we're responsible for, that this really is the exciting stuff and why we're here. So thank you for all that you guys are doing.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
because we love it.
Mr. Keys?
I'm not going to belabor it anymore. I think that we had some good comments and questions from the board, but I would also echo what everybody else has said. Thank you for your energy. I know that you're passionate about it, and I can see in the way you present. And I'm glad that we have 2 individuals who are so passionate leading the charge to make sure that our academic progresses are continuing to increase. So thank you for your hard work in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fields?
Ditto with the comments from all the other board members. My question centered around the monitoring, and I think you answered that with Dr. Allen. I do have a question, and it might not be related directly to what you're presenting, but at some point in time, I would love to see data. I would love to see the curriculum that our alternative ed programs are using.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's very key and critical to the academic success as well.
And And I'm happy to do that, and we can share, but I will leave you with this on that. In the past, our alternative sites, many of them just did virtual learning through Edgenuity or something else. We've changed that, both at Bill Duncan and Don Woods. As an example, when kids got there, they were taking classes on Edgenuity. And we knew it wasn't the best educational model. We just didn't have an opportunity to get to it yet because we had so many other things going on in our traditional schools. This year, I'm very, very happy to say, under the direction of Mr. Bellamy and Ms. Akins, they're providing direct instruction to those kids. So when kids go, they are getting direct instruction on grade level lessons with the supports that we're providing in our traditional schools. And that goes for all of our, including Rural Academy, all of our alternative. We've moved more towards direct instruction with certified teacher.
And I think that's good, and I think that the community, and I think that the parents and others that care about the education of all of our students need to hear that.
Sure.
Because Superintendent Hyde and I have had that conversation before. We had a young lady who attended Girls Inc. She's no longer part of Girls Inc., but she basically told me that she needed to just basically go to school and do the virtual, but there was no class instruction. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yes. And we are working hard, and I will give Mr. Bruno a lot of credit around that. He and I have been working on that for a couple of years. He's kind of taken that over now as the regional that oversees those schools and supports them, but that is a priority for us in DOS. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There are no further questions or comments. Board members, I'm not looking at my phone, so I don't know if I've received any text messages. We're an hour in. Are you requiring a break? Sorry? Okay. All right, we're good. Next item up is comprehensive high school rezoning. Mr. McLemore.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Hyde. We're pleased to come before you this morning after the district has conducted several in-person town halls as well as a virtual town hall. The intent for this morning's presentation is we'll go over pretty much how the town halls were structured. We'll go over the survey results by region, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&As at the very tail end. So without any further ado, first up, let's go through this. First up will be the Southwest region. Again, just as a reminder, this region included Bartow, Fort Meade, George Jenkins, and Mulberry. I won't necessarily spend too much time on reviewing the current boundaries, proposed boundaries. You've seen this data before, similar to the utilizations. But just to reiterate the point, district staff was laser focused on really focusing in on the proposed utilization without portables based off the board's direction to stop the reliance on portables. So really to the meat of the subject here. So in the Southwest region, based off the survey data itself, Bartow High School, we had one survey. And again, you see some of the pictures from the actual town hall itself. Really didn't care for any of the new boundaries themselves. However, with these surveys here, or with this particular survey, it really didn't give any guidance as to what they would prefer anyway. So it was more of a, okay, message received, not necessarily didn't like any of the proposed options. Fort Meade Middle Senior, no surveys were submitted with regards to this school. George Jenkins, we did receive 3 surveys, and one of those surveys was not germane to the rezoning process. It was more of an operational staffing student-teacher ratio kind of a response, nothing really substantive to the actual rezoning boundaries themselves. But the other 2 really focused, and they suggested that they wanted to extend the proposed boundary for George Jenkins closer to the Lake Merriam Publix. And then another one wanted the boundary extended to Yule Road. Based off of looking at these 2 requests, it would almost be counterintuitive to the goal that we were trying to achieve for George Jenkins, and that is relief, because George Jenkins is very much at capacity. So it would almost be counterintuitive if we were to start to address and try to expand or move those boundaries, because to move one boundary for one school, you're going to be impacting 3, possibly even 4 other schools. And in that part of the Polk County, or looking at trying to give George Jenkins some much-needed relief. Lastly, moving to Mulberry Senior High School, two surveys were submitted. The one was more toward likes the current boundaries, but they were opposed to pulling in homes with Lakeland addresses. This is a point I need to clarify. When we all have mailing addresses, those addresses are established by the Postal Service. They don't necessarily aren't reflective of your city limits. Just because you may have a Lakeland address doesn't necessarily mean you fall within the city limits of Lakeland. Oftentimes people fail to realize that fact. And then lastly, the other survey made a comment of they were pretty much neutral based off their current boundaries and any of the proposed boundaries. But going back to that one comment, one survey result from Mulberry Senior High School, that was an individual who attended one of the town halls in person. We did speak with them. We did look at the area that they specifically called out for, and looking at the entrances to where that those communities are and the students that were in that area. So we're talking in that Shepherd West South Florida Avenue area. It really didn't seem to really make a whole lot of difference in terms of the utilization rates, but it would actually be counterproductive to the bus routing and transportation improvement that we were also looking at improving for these schools. So with that, we'll move to our next region. Northwest region. This region included Kathleen, Lake Gibson, Lakeland, and Tenoroc. Again, seeing that. In this region here, Kathleen High School, you had 3 surveys. One survey was really more about the parent preferred option 1, which was the recommended option. And then we actually had input from our students. A student actually preferred option 3. They didn't necessarily agree with the current boundary, but really that was just their input. But it was great that we're actually getting input from our students themselves. So we actually get the end user, if you will, to get their feel on these recommended boundaries. With Lake Gibson High School, again, one survey felt that they were pretty much neutral to all the boundaries, but if they actually had to make a selection, they preferred option 2. And then the other survey, they're pretty much neutral all the way around. Moving to Lakeland High School. 4 surveys. Community member liked option 1. Wanted the district to include other neighborhoods if possible. They cited specific neighborhoods, however, based off of our analysis of looking at those key specific community areas, again, it would be counterproductive to the bus routing transportation aspect, as well as the area they were referencing. We were going back and forth between George Jenkins and Lakeland Senior. So again, we're trying to provide George Jenkins some relief. We're trying to balance those enrollments between those 2 competing high schools. And then 2 others really preferred option 2. No surveys were received for Tenoroc. Moving on to the central region, this included Auburndale, Lake Region, and Winter Haven. Auburndale High, parents currently like the current Auburndale Senior High School boundary, but if they had to, they would prefer option 1. And then another survey is that they really didn't prefer any of the proposed options. Lake Region High School, the parents didn't really like any of the proposed options for that. And they really didn't necessarily provide reasons why or suggestions as to, hey, consider these communities, move this boundary to this area. So we really didn't get any indication of, okay, well, how can we relook this boundary to make it better responsive to the community? Excuse me. And then with Winter Haven Senior High School, one parent survey respondent disliked the current boundary, but they did prefer the recommended boundary itself. And then the other survey was the parents currently like the existing boundaries and did not agree or prefer any of the recommended options. Winter Haven is, again, one of our high schools that is very much seeking enrollment relief because of what their numbers are as well as their reliance on the portables. And to give you a breakdown on the surveys for that, we received 2 surveys for Auburndale, 6 surveys for Lake Region, and 3 surveys for Winter Haven. Moving up to our Northeast region, we have Davenport, Haines City Senior, Ridge Community, as well as already looking at our new proposed attendance boundary for the district's newest high school in the Northeast. Again, looking at our current boundaries and the proposed boundaries, and looking at the utilization figures. So in this area here, Davenport Senior High School had 2 surveys. One parent did not like any of the options presented, and they weren't located within the current Davenport Senior High School boundary. Another was the student felt neutral about the current proposed boundary, but they also did not like any of the proposed boundaries. Haines City did not log any surveys, neither did Ridge Community. But for the new proposed attendance boundary for the new high school, one was neutral towards the recommendation, and the other was, again, very in favor of it. And rounding out our town halls, going to the southeast region that covered McLaughlin and Frostproof Middle Senior. McLaughlin did not log any respondents. However, there was one survey for Frostproof Senior High School. Parent did not prefer the current boundary and actually preferred option 2, which is the recommended option for that boundary itself. So again, in summary, again, you've seen this data table here. The district, based off all these town halls, our in-person and our virtual ones, the district recorded 31 surveys. We've received 10 emails from families, and we've been back and forth. Of those 10 emails, 6 were just pretty much general inquiries. Hey, I live at this address. Does this impact me? 3 of the emails were more of, well, why are we doing this right now? Can't you just postpone this a little bit later? And then one was adamantly against their recommended boundary option. The website itself logged more 6,828 views as of 8:45 this morning. So with that, I stand ready for your questions.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. And I know we're still trying to meet because I have a couple of questions about that Auburndale zone that includes a cutout of an apartment building for Tenorock and the airport of Winter Haven zoned to Auburndale, which may not be a big deal other than if I live across the street and I want to go to that program, I'll be going to Winter Haven High School, which occurs anyway. That was the feedback that I've received. But I did have a question, and it might be for our future planning. I was contacted by a family that is being zoned from Jenkins to Mulberry, but the neighborhood goes to all of our magnet schools in Lakeland, so she was concerned that, with these magnets, they all feed into your Lakeland high schools, but then we're pulling out to a different school. And I kind of talked to her about options for high schools and academies. And high school is the area where you really can, if you have interest, look at other options for you, different than elementary and middle. But I don't know if we need to talk about that if we have more magnets and how we plan that. That I understand her, I did understand her point that coming up through school, you would assume they would be going to school with the kids they went to the magnet schools with, and they won't be off that old 37 area. But I think that's something more of a magnet conversation than a zoning conversation. And I will try to get back with you because we've tried twice, and I know we're both busy.
I apologize.
It's okay, and we'll work it out. Thanks.
And if I may, with regards
Sure.
to the Winter Haven Airport, the Winter Haven Airport is a unique situation in that if you look at our current existing high school attendance boundaries right now, technically that airport is split already as it exists today. The official terminal, the main terminal for Winter Haven Airport actually falls within the Auburndale Senior High School attendance boundaries, whereas your main runway 23 and 28, they start falling into the Winter Haven attendance boundary, as well as the Aero Club on the ancillary hangars to the south. But it's an interesting situation.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. And thank you all. I was able to attend one of your sessions, and the questions that got thrown at you that you all were able to answer were very impressive, because that was every topic under the sun when it comes to where my student will be going to school. My one question, and I thought it had been covered originally when we added Harmony to the Lake Region pattern, is Snively Avenue is still considered Winter Haven. It's that little dip down into You literally, I giggled a little bit when you said at the meeting, you know, we don't have moats or things around districts because there's literally a canal that you have to go over to get to the other side of, into Eagle Lake. And that is very much by the community considered Eagle Lake region. Nobody really understands why it's zoned to Winter Haven because it just doesn't make sense. That I would love for us to look at that again. It's a really small strip, but we're essentially taking kids out of the Eagle Lake region community to send them to Winter Haven, which is one of our trouble spots that's over capacity. Again, I thought it had been addressed as part of the Harmony conversation, and I forwarded the email or re-forwarded the email to Superintendent Hyde as well, so he has that information. And then the other question I had gotten was Lakeland High School in Harrison, just a concern that those Harrison students are being included in that number for Lakeland. Just concerns of if we add 600 students to our roster, where are they going to go? Because classrooms right now are currently at capacity. So I don't know if we have an answer for that or if you can get back to me, but that's one of the.
So we looked at the Harrison, so yes, when we were looking at the total enrollment for Lakeland Senior High School, because the Harrison students do occupy core classroom space. So we do have to acknowledge them, but we also looked at, okay, well, what is the Harrison enrollment figures? Where have they been? And we did sort of go backwards in time to look and identify their trend enrollment figures, as well as Lakeland Senior High School proper. So when we were looking at these boundaries, we are accounting for those two distinct student bodies, if you will. But again, Lakeland Senior is actually one of those areas that they actually do need, again, our goal for utilization for a high school, we're wanting to get them up closer to 85%. And Lakeland Senior, they're sitting around the 76 threshold, so we are wanting to expand their boundary a little bit. So they definitely have room to grow.
So is the fish capacity including all of the more specific spaces at Harrison that wouldn't necessarily be able to be used for a Lakeland traditional classroom?
The total fish
or for traditional classes?
The total fish reflects every student carrying capacity room across that campus, both Harrison and Lakeland Senior proper.
Gotcha. So our schools that have these 800-seat auditoriums, those are counted as fish capacity?
Not all rooms technically carry student capacity when you're looking at a list of rooms, okay, what constitutes student carrying capacity when we're adding up based off all the room types to get your overall capacity.
Okay. If we could get something on what those rooms are, their film students have a movie theater that's not, so there may be just looking at the uses of spaces and, you couldn't necessarily put a chemistry lab in some of those spaces.
Right. No, wait, hang on. Actually, so we need to be careful about restricting certain areas because it doesn't seem to support an instructional space. Absolutely, those spaces will be used anytime they're vacant and a class is not scheduled for them. But to your point, no one's going to schedule a chemistry class unless it's the class portion, not the lab portion of the course. So if a school requires, because of space, because of need, renovations, repairs, whatever the issues are, yes, those spaces are flexed all the time to be used, so our cafeterias or our media centers. But in the event of, or in a specific example of an auditorium, I would absolutely expect for a principal to figure out when it's not being used and schedule courses in there, because students can absolutely be in there for certain coursework. But to your point, you're not going to do a physical education class in there, but you could do a health class, or you could do an English language arts literature class. You could do all kinds of different core instructional areas in there as well. But it's not going to be used as an enrichment space per se in the traditional sense because of the way it's structured. But that's our expectation, which is why I do believe most of those spaces are included in our fish capacity numbers. But we'll go ahead and do an analysis and make sure everybody understands what the capacities are for those areas and how it affects our overall fish capacity calculation.
And I think my bigger concern would be if we were to add, and I don't know what the exact number of students is, but even if we were to add 200 or 300 students, that's 200 or 300 students that now need additional science classes and additional classes that do have to have more? So are we going to have some
No, I think it's already
renovation
included in
costs
our-
and things?
Yeah, I don't think we're adding that to our fish capacity. That should already be included, because it is considered an instructional space. It's however we define that space when we submitted the information to the state, which is what has to be amended or revised and updated. But I see them nodding yes, so Mr. Fix?
The only thing I would add to that is that's correct. So there's certain spaces that do carry student capacity and certain spaces that don't. So for example, when you use the auditorium, in my career, there have been many a school that have used that as an instructional space, but it doesn't carry student capacity. There will be other specialties related to drama or whatever, and if they carry capacity, it's very minimal. So many of those things are taken into account when it's programmatic. So and we can certainly look at all those spaces, but those spaces that are strictly for the drama are going to be, if they carry capacity, they're going to be very minimal in their capacity bearing capacity. That's just part of that design when it comes to fish. Now, however, as the superintendent said, when schools can use those spaces however they deem to use those spaces, we don't come in and check them on that. So thus, they can use a classroom, put a classroom or two in the auditorium if they feel that that's a good use of a space. They could take a black box theater, and if they want to hold a class there, they could, but it's not going to be carrying capacity. I don't know, hopefully that helps relieve some of the concern.
No, that is helpful. My biggest concern, like I said, I just want to make sure we're not approving increasing enrollment because we have an empty dance studio for 3 periods a day, but if we increase enrollment, we're going to need a chemistry lab or something that has very different needs. So I just want to make sure that that's something that, and if we are doing that, that we understand what the costs are to renovate some of those spaces. So, thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you. I wasn't able to attend any of the meetings, but I thank Mr. McLemore and his team for meeting with me. I had a couple of follow-ups, and you might have sent me the response, and I just haven't seen it. But I know that with the Kathleen High School proposed rezoning, some of those kids were going to be proposed to go to Lakeland High School. Do you remember how many students that would be?
I'll go back and double check the email. I know our staff, we did calculate that, and we'll get that back to you.
Okay, and then the other thing is, how do we respond to the survey participants? Because I think it would be neat to respond to the students whenever it's appropriate. It might not be appropriate now, but for them to have an interest in giving us their opinion, I think is very, very good and positive.
We did include it as an optional feature if they want to provide their email address. Some of them did, but a good majority did not. But to your point, absolutely. Those that we do have their a means of contacting them, we're definitely going to reach back out and follow up and just thank them for their input.
And then the survey, has it closed now?
Yes, ma'am. They are all closed.
Okay. And I just want to thank you and your team for doing a great job. It's a lot of work, and you're not even done yet.
Actually getting ready tonight for another ABC meeting.
And the work actually continues even beyond that. So kudos to you and your team.
Mr. Keys?
I want to say first and foremost, I'm glad that the process has carried on. As someone, and Mr. Sharpless can attest to this, is there's a lot of work in sitting on that committee and making recommendations and crunching the data. So thank you for that. Thank you for answering those questions and fielding them. I think that's one of the most integral parts of the process, is as those concerns arise from parents, and I'm very pleased to see students responding to those, addressing those concerns, because I think communication is the key as we go out and establish new boundary areas. And that was in your wealth of knowledge to be able to spit out data numbers. When you started telling me about Lakeland, Winter Haven Airport and what runway numbers were in different boundary zones, that's an true, gosh, I'm having a loss of thought here, just to show how much effort and time you put into it. So thank you so much for that. And I'm just, again, to reiterate, glad to see the process is moving forward because it is a heavy lift. And then I guess maybe finally also, thank you to those who serve on that committee. It's sometimes a thankless process, and a lot of times you would get more criticism than anything else. So I appreciate those who have volunteered to serve on that. It's very important. So,
Dr. Allen?
Thank you, Superintendent. Yeah, definitely would ditto that. Appreciate the time that you and your staff has put into this. I had a chance to attend the one in Bartow and the one in Lakeland as well. Do we wish for more data? Yes. I think community input's beneficial, so I wish for more of that. And I do appreciate you noting the student feedback. I do wonder, maybe we didn't, connect with particular families, whereas, we could have some type of student engagement where then that communication gets back to the parent. And so the timeliness of that, or top of mind for families, could be using the student as a voice in a sense in the household. So I'm not sure where we're at with that. And because that's going to be my last question as far as timeline, finalizing our public feedback, and then recommendations that are brought back to us for us to vote on them. But that would be my last question. So thinking about Bartow and the way that we've communicated for that in particular, I know when I was there on site, just hitting a couple of different staff members, they felt that they didn't have communication like why that relief was there. So, obviously the concern, we're going to be losing units and yada, yada, because that's a pretty significant number. So then, how can we communicate some of those relief spaces and a timeline, right? Because obviously you see the future, right? We can see the development, and I think the data on our website's really good, just to note the development. I appreciate the GIS data is very smart as well. So, but communicating, a timeline of when they're going to get back to that utilization when we have those relief scenarios would be beneficial, and I'm not sure if we can provide that to our staff members at those particular schools. Now, and then the follow-up on the Lakeland and Harrison. 600 is a concern, definitely a big concern, and I'm hearing that over and over from our community. And, I don't know the last time that Lakeland and Harrison would have been at that capacity, how many years ago. So, concerns of, bathrooms and things like that to jolt the school with 600 students is a challenge. Now, I lived on Hollingsworth Road for 12 years, so I know the traffic patterns. I know that dilemma as far as Frank Lloyd Wright, sort of merging into Hollingsworth Road, and just so many traffic fatalities at 98 and Hollingsworth Road. There's so many times that main artery was shut down, and traffic was piped into some of those areas. So I have concerns of, 600 students all at once, in a sense, in that space. So from a traffic standpoint, have we analyzed that to really account for 600 students? And, if we can truly have a facility audit, that's important to me, because we just did a ribbon cutting for the Teacher Initiative Academy with Lakeland High. So, is that space now that's allocated to that academy and that initiative, is that space going to be taken away from them? Or, I think about as new specialty programs have developed over the years. For me, somebody that teaches in the visual arts, I'm very protective of my space. And I can imagine, like, if we have a painting studio or a drawing studio and you've got easels, and now, like, that was reallocated in a sense. So, and then now that's going to be open to general pop or whatever. I just know that sometimes we can be very protective of our spaces, especially when you're utilizing things that, technology and so forth, that you'd be concerned about as an instructor or so forth. So I don't know. I think, to me, I'm more comfortable with 3, maybe 400, but not 600. So I just love to hear us, have we done a walkthrough with both principals on site to evaluate the facilities as far as, you know, the 600 number? So those are my questions. And then that last, or thoughts, the last question is like timeline, superintendent, as far as when the final recommendations are brought to us.
And so to help answer, maybe not completely.
I'll answer this enrollment question and the facilities question, but
Oh,
if you'll just go ahead and address the timeline, I'd appreciate it.
The timeline then. So as it stands right now, we have, because this is considered a rulemaking action, we have it tentatively scheduled for the board meeting at the end of October, with the second/final/adoption, when it actually gets approved, either at the November 16th or possibly the December one. We're still wanting to double check to see if there is a specific number of days we have to separate the board meeting dates. November's kind of weird because we're having to shift left because of Thanksgiving, obviously, but at least for now, the first reading, no action taken, will be at the end of this month.
Yep. And I appreciate your comment, Superintendent, because I'm sure you have an opinions, but I would prefer to hear from your staff on those two questions.
You'll get a written response from staff at a future date, but the issue with 600, I think what has to be remembered here is you're not going to have 600 students automatically rezoned at one time. That is not the proposal before the board, and I've made that very clear every time we've brought this topic.
Do we have an
So
estimation?
for 600 students, again, it's a phased-in proposal so that students who are currently attending elsewhere may not necessarily have to attend there unless they make a choice to do so. Additionally, beyond that, if the amount of school choice that currently takes place will ensure that 600 students do not attend there. And we've provided that data to you previously to show the number of students zoned for Lakeland who opt out of Lakeland, and we'll resend that to the board. But as far as overall physical space, yes, we can incorporate 600 students into the master schedule and show that it has the capacity to sustain that level of enrollment increase. It also will also address the issues of parking. And so many of our schools do restrict parking to juniors and seniors. And so we'll have to work with the administration to determine how to do that. As far as instructional space is concerned, I'm very much appreciative of the fact that instructional staff want to maintain a classroom as their own. But the reality of it is, classroom spaces are paid for by taxpayers and should be used to the maximum occupancy to provide the best possible ROI to our staff. And obviously, those are not decisions that are made callously. They're made with a great deal of intentionality. They're made by the building principals. They're not forced into that issue. So it's important to clarify that as well.
I agree. And I think the classroom is more than just the walls inside the space. I mean, there's other elements that make up the space itself. So, I mean, do we have an estimation of how many new students would be on that campus next year?
Next year?
None.
I mean,
Not next year.
well, it
Well,
would be
implementation-wise,
next school
yes.
year. We can look, get you that number. We'll get
Okay.
back to you.
All right. I think that's all I have for now.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. And I also earlier, just in looking at the survey results, leads me to question if as we're looking at middle and elementary school, there should be other things included in those surveys. Is that something that we're looking at already, or even just requiring if you don't select, you want option 1, 2, or 3, you have to give us a what else? What do you want? That I just.
So we are taking some lessons learned about the surveys that we went through the high schools, and we're going to build upon them for the middle school and elementaries. But in terms of requiring them to really provide the data, I mean, there are some fields that you before you can even submit the survey, you have to fill this box out.
Right. Yeah, that's one that I would be interested in. You know, great for you to tell us that you don't like it, but if you're going to tell us you don't like it, that doesn't help me unless you tell us what you would like. So if they select no to I don't like any of them, I would prefer that they be required to, if we're going to view your results and take them into consideration, you can't just say you don't like anything, that you have to give us some sort of feedback. I also would be curious, have we worked at all with Zen City on this, or is this something that we can work with them on as far as developing the survey? Just because I know they specialize in trying to get the best results that would, because I love that we had people fill out the survey. I don't know how beneficial it was in being able to
we're able to
to
tie,
truly make any changes on that, so.
in somewhere, in, with how these surveys, the survey software is nested within the GIS software. So the two were able to talk simultaneously, seamlessly between the two.
I
Okay.
don't know that we have a responsibility to address the concerns of 15 people. I mean, I think respectfully to Ms. Fields' point, we have an obligation to respond back, and we could, if we have their name and contact information in the survey, then we could write back asking them to clarify that point. But this board would not be making a decision based off of the limited amount of survey responses. And, you know, it is frustrating as a school district, it's frustrating as a superintendent to be bringing you recommendations when this in particular was incredibly well advertised. It was in print media repeatedly. It was in regular media repeatedly. Every news station covered stories on this. It didn't happen just once. It happened every week. There were announcements on all social media pages. All of our middle school principals that have feeder patterns to these high schools, all of our high school administrators used their ConnectEd or their school messenger system to communicate this. So it went out via text or went out via email, went out via phone call. And to see the limited number of responses, I really don't know how to interpret that, other than we're going to proceed. But so we can definitely, if their survey data contains contact information, we can ask them to clarify further. And then what we'll do is use Zen City and to utilize the AI aspect to see if there's conversations about this taking place out in social media that are not directly tagged to us. That's one of the benefits of that program. And but from our perspective, you know, again, I don't know how to interpret the lack of feedback. Either everyone's okay with this, or people presume it's a done deal, or lack of engagement until it affects them after the fact. But I think we've provided a great deal of opportunity for voice and choice in this matter. So as a superintendent, I'm going to take the data and I'm going to make the best recommendation to the board that I can.
And I don't disagree with that. My concern comes that in looking at the surveys, overwhelmingly, we keep hearing they didn't like it, but they didn't tell us why. So is there a better way to get the why in the survey? If they're filling out the survey, you know, it may be, I'm fine with whichever one you choose, but I want you to recognize that my neighborhood is being split in two.
Yeah, I think
And
we can
didn't catch
definitely,
that. So I want to make sure that we're capturing anything like that.
we can incorporate that into the elementary and middle school surveys that will be developed for the next round of school rezoning. I think by and large, if I had to speak from a position of just what my gut tells me, I don't think high school's as disruptive for families and students as we initially thought it might be, especially since we're grandfathering people in as a recommendation, and I've made that very clear from day one. There's so much choice. Every school has an average of, 40% choice, 30 to 40% choice already, impacting their enrollment. So, and I think it's an issue of convenience at times for some high schoolers, for freshmen and sophomores. But by and large, we see a great deal of mobility across the district, and we bus, quite frankly, for many of our programs. And many school districts don't, and that's going to have to be a conversation at some point in the near future. I think the board and the district are going to get a great deal of feedback when we start talking about elementary. And not so much maybe even middle school, but elementary will definitely hear some feedback because people want a concise neighborhood school zone, and we'll do that to the best of our extent, our abilities, considering all the rules that we do follow, with ensuring that we're not having kids cross major roadways to the extent possible. You know, we're not disrupting apartment complexes, and I think a lot of the feedback we've received for high school rezoning has definitely helped inform the process moving forward, and we do have a tenants boundary committee tonight, so they're already ready to kick off and go into the next area. So, and then remember, the final recommendation, actually the attendance boundary committee will review the survey data and then make a recommendation in my office. I'll either accept or reject that recommendation and ultimately bring one to the board. So that's the process moving forward.
Thank you. And then my last question, just as we're talking about the marketing for it, and again, high school I think is much less disruptive, to your point that there's so many programs and you can transfer to another high school to do any number of things you may be interested in. Elementary and middle, I think, will be a slightly different conversation. Do we have the capability, and have we looked at sending postcards if they are if their zone is changing? We have not. Because I think that the response that if if I'm zoned for Winter Haven High School and I see on the new map I'm going to be zoned for Winter Haven High School, great. I'm not changing regardless. I don't care. But if I know that my boundaries changing, it's going to be a very different conversation. And I don't know how many people realize at my address it's changing, that I just would be curious what that would look like and if that's something that we've considered.
We could explore that, because I'd have to come back to the board with a cost. And I'd love to say yes, but knowing what it takes to set that up and get those mailings done accurately.
Right.
I mean, we get complaints every year about bus assignments. I just don't want to I want to make sure we do it well. I think what I would prefer as an alternative, just thinking about it, is we could attach something to their end of the year report cards. We could attach something, so we reduce our overall cost. But we would just basically print out something for those students.
Just with that.
Let me and a team look at that, and we can come back to you. So Jennifer, if you'll make a note of that, appreciate it.
I just think if I know, especially and obviously we're not going to be able to catch the kids that are 3 and it will affect, but if they're 6 and they have a younger sibling at home, those are the parents that I think are going to be most engaged in the conversation.
There may be a way to flag it and focus.
That
tells a parent when they go to re-enroll that your child has to enroll here. I'm a little cautious about this because, again, we're grandfathering in families. And so I don't want to create any undue concern for a family who is going to clearly choose, my kid's going to be a senior next year, we're not changing schools. I don't want to create any undue concern for them, but it may impact transportation, because part of the recommendation that has not come before the board yet is, what are we recommending, that while we're allowing students to remain on that campus, are we going to continue that bus route? And I won't say anything yet, but there will be some recommendations that we're going to have to struggle with. So.
Well, and again, I think it can be an opportunity to be able to clarify all of that in a direct communication of, your child will be grandfathered in. This is, that may or may not include transportation, but if you have younger students, they would not be grandfathered. Whatever those conversations are, it just may be an opportunity to have a little bit more target.
My concerns and hesitancy is not cost, it's really just the accuracy, our ability to be accurate in our communication for every single individual student, because some parents should not get a notification, well, you're grandfathered in, because they'll misconstrue that. If I put all of that in one message, I guarantee people will just assume I'm grandfathered in. And I don't want that to be the case. So let's explore the options, and I'll bring something back by the October meeting, second meeting in October.
Thank you.
Mr. Keys.
We're going to be short because I know this, Ms. Griffin and Mr. Davis are really excited about coming up next. So, I can tell you as the vice chair of that committee from pretty much its inception, so I sat on the board, that I can count on one hand the amount of public comments that we had during these meetings and this whole process, right? Community meetings were attended, so I'm kind of the superintendent on that. I think it's probably doesn't happen until, you realize you're affected. But again, this being grandfathered in, I think what those that are going to be most affected on those incoming freshmen, thinking they were going to this school, now they're going to a different one. I can understand that, but I think asking the why is important when we see those responses. We didn't like these choices, well, why? So adding that, I think for the next 2 phases, the middle and elementary will be significant. And I'm worried about correspondence as well, because I think what will happen on that is you're going to get this massive amount of parents, what's happening here? And us being able to field those, when a lot of the times, again, choice is so large in this, and especially with our high schools, all the programs available. So I agree with what has been said multiple times. I don't think it's as important, not say important, that's the wrong word. I don't think it's as significant impact in the high schools as it would be in the middle, elementary and middle. But I really, really like you're asking, well, tell us why you didn't like those choices. But I think largely we have to move forward with it based on the recommendations of the committee and what's recommended to the superintendent, because this is long overdue and it's drawn out. So that's all I have.
Ms. Fields.
I would have to agree with Superintendent Hyde that while there might not be much conversation now, after the fact, there will be. And then if transportation is a piece, there will be as well. And then hopefully if there is a lot of conversation, it will help to encourage the parents to be more vocal and to provide more input for the next phase, because it will come, but it will come after the fact, in my opinion.
Agreed. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. No further questions or comments. Board members, the next item for today is, my board docs went down, I apologize. The next item for today is proposed rule development for school board policies.
Can we take a quick break, please?
Okay.
We're going to recess for 15 minutes, and we will return.
Did you ever find anything else?
All right, welcome back. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. I would say during the break, no one actually came and shared any good Halloween jokes. So I don't have any more Halloween jokes for you today. So, so Superintendent, I will hand it off for you to lead us in the rest of our work session. Superintendent? It's all yours, Superintendent.
Yes, sir, I heard. I'm sorry. I was trying to get back to my board docs. My screen went blank. They did something during the break, I think. So up next, we have proposed rule development for school board policies. Board members, consistent with past practice, you have all of the updates below. They do have reg and strike-through language, underlined language to provide you a summary of the changes. Most of these, if not all of these, are legislatively mandated changes and/or changes that came as a result of changes in legislation based off Neola's feedback. There are two in particular in here that we've talked about previously. The one in here in particular, I'm looking for it, I apologize, is, no, it was the one on clerical staff, or collegial ministries.
Yeah, so
Is it
that's
volunteers?
added too. That's in the criminal background screening
Okay.
policy, and then also in volunteers. So that's going to be 8475. And
So the recommendations that are before the board today for consideration when you adopt the policies, potentially adopt the policies at your next meeting, understand that that policy was written after, if you recall, when we first had this conversation, I had expressed some concerns about whether or not the requirement for honoring a conversation that it's had with a parishioner through traditional confessional or non-traditional confessional practices would interfere in any way with a mandatory reporting requirement on our campuses. And so Ms. Wyatt and others provided me with names of several of our leading religious leaders. I spoke at length with Bishop Mincy about this. He had some great recommendations, actually, about the fact that, you know, he didn't see a conflict, but and as well as none of our other faith-based leaders saw a conflict because they made a very strong distinction between what happens in the process of their ministry or what they believe would happen in the role that they would be serving here. But that training would be required. And so if approved, we will develop a training module so that anyone who's interested in serving that capacity will have to complete that before we allow them on our campus. So that being said, I just want to bring that to your attention because there was a reminder there of a conversation we've been having over the last probably 8 to 10 months on this topic. So I'll turn it over. Mr. Davis? Ms. Griffin?
that's right. Good morning, everyone. Today we have 16 policies that are before you, and these are from our, we've been breaking them up to bring them to you, and these are from like the 8,000s and 9,000s groups of our policies. So I'll take, I've kind of grouped them by subject area so that if you have questions, we have staff here if I'm not able to answer them. So the first ones that we'll go through are all related to school safety and security. So policy 8405 and 8406, that's our school safety and security policy, and then reports of suspicious activity and potential threats to schools. These just have minor revisions that incorporate Florida Rule 6A-1.0018, and it just is related to strengthening of the school safety requirements. And then policy 8407 is our safe schools officers policy. And these revisions are based on Senate Bill 1470, which includes specific requirements that training for school security guards be conducted by the sheriff's office, which we're already doing, and then additional revisions surrounding the new FDLE reporting requirements. There's a few technical changes to terminology in the policy, and then just an updated reference to the Guardian program is now the Chris Hickson, Coach Aaron Feist, and Coach Scott Beigel Guardian program. Policy 8420 is our emergency management, emergency preparedness, and emergency response agencies policies. And these are also, this policy is also updated based on Senate Bill 1470, and it addresses school safety requirements. It provides distinctions between exclusive zones and non-exclusive zones, and then door and lock requirements. It also adds a provision that substitute teachers will be provided the school safety protocols before they begin their first day substituting at a particular school. And then policy 8470, which is our registered sexual predators and sex offenders policy. It used, the current name of that policy is like community notification of registered sexual predators and sexual offenders. So one of the suggested revisions is to take that community notification part off because the policy expands the scope. It's not just about notifying, it's about those sexual predators and sex offenders as a whole. And so you'll see a revision to the title and then just a section addressing the presence of those individuals on school property. I'll take a pause if there's any questions on any of these because that ends our, none this far. Okay, so we will move into policy 8431, which is preparedness for toxic hazard and asbestos hazard. And this policy incorporates new requirements that when conducting the asbestos abatement projects, the contractor or consultant should be licensed and regulated by the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, as opposed to the Florida Department of Health. And then policy 8452 is our automated external defibrillators, or AED policy, which this policy is revised as a result of House Bill 1607, which is all related to cardiac emergencies and AEDs on school grounds. And it requires schools to develop a plan for urgent life-saving emergencies if an individual on school grounds is experiencing cardiac arrest. Policy 8462 is our student abuse, abandonment, and,
Ms. Griffin, let me just clarify for the board, because I know I've had some individual conversations with board members about how we're going to fulfill the requirement and expectations of making sure that all of our students have EKGs and things like that, since that's related to the defibrillators. I just wanted to go ahead and make that connection for them. So there are several partners that have stepped forward in Polk County and will be assisting us with the implementation of that in the near future, including our Department of Health and others that already do physicals for our students. And so I will, in the near future, let me rephrase that, Mr. Talbot, in the near future, along with Sherry Scott and others, will be bringing a presentation before the board outlining how we're going to make sure we're in compliance with those things. So, thank you.
And on that point, Mr. Hyde brought up EKGs. We do have some revisions to policies along the lines of EKGs, and those are actually coming at the end of this month. So you'll see that later this month. So policy 8462 is our student abuse, abandonment, and neglect. And this is based on House Bill 1237, which just requires school districts to provide training around human trafficking to all employees. And this will be a training that's provided by the state. And then moving into, these are the two policies that Mr. Hyde was referencing before I began. Policy 8475, criminal background screening for contractor access, and then policy 9200, our volunteers policy. And revisions to both of these policies includes the optional language surrounding school chaplains, and you can see in there that we've selected the option to allow school chaplains and then the different requirements that are selected in there. And as Mr. Hyde mentioned, there will be training module that comes along with that. Outside of the school chaplain revisions to that policy, policy 8475 also adds language regarding the care provider backgrounds clearinghouse, the ACA clearinghouse, and then policy 9200 has some additional revisions related to statutory references in the background screening process. Do you have questions about any of those policies?
Mr. Sharpless?
I have a question about 9200 when it comes to chaplains, specifically on page 2, under the qualifications. I just want a clarification. When you looked at it, it selected both of those options. For the purpose of this policy, a chaplain may be any person who the superintendent concludes can fulfill the responsibilities described in this policy. And the second one says, for the purpose of this policy, a chaplain shall be, and you can read the rest of that. So I was just confused. Are we doing anyone the superintendent concludes, or the second option there? Are we doing both options? I just want a clarification.
To do both,
Okay.
to have both options. So
Just to clarify too, the second group is what I will base my approval off of, because it's established in policy. So it says I have to refer to policy is in the language above. So they basically have to meet one of those conditions in order for me to approve them.
Okay. I just wanted to.
Yes, sir.
I was confused. Thank you. That's only my only question.
And if we needed to, we could tweak that sentence just to say, for the purposes of informing the superintendent's decision, a chaplain shall be a person of, but we can work on that.
I think that would make it more clear. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
More questions on?
There are none.
Okay, so then we'll move on to our school nutrition policies. And so policy 8500 is our school nutrition policy. And then policy 8540, vending machines, policy 8550, competitive food sales. The bulk of this renovation is to rescind the vending machines and competitive food sales policies, but to incorporate that language into the school nutrition program policy. So you'll see that 8540 and 8550 are complete strike-throughs. It's just to make our school nutrition policy, just as a whole, include everything related to school nutrition. And so it will just be one policy. So that's where a bulk of the green language added to 8500 comes from the rescinded language in the other two policies. In addition to that, there's just some paragraph headings that have changed just for ease of review and reference. Modifications to the language related to school breakfast, and that aligns with Florida Statute 595.405. As I mentioned, incorporating the language regarding vending machines and competitive food sales. And then modifications to language regarding meal charges, bad debt, and negative account balances. And then that's it for those policies. And then policy 8531, free and reduced price meals. These revisions, they're almost technical in the sense that they include some new legal references. There's a deletion of one legal reference and then modifications to a couple areas like terminology in that policy. Do we have any questions on any of the school nutrition policies?
Mr. Sharpless?
Yes, I've, on two different policies, I have questions. 8500, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment.
Okay.
I just want to say, I really like the options that were selected for this one. To me, a kid, just because they have a negative lunch balance, there should be no stigmas around that kid.
Right.
And, you know, I know I've heard stories of some school districts where that kid gets, you know, a cold lunch or something else where this policy would not allow that.
Right.
And I can tell you, I think that's really important. And so I want to thank you for when you presented it to us to selecting those options, because I think it's really important that our students feel supported, and it's not that kid's fault that's necessarily that they have a negative lunch account. And so I just want to thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I did work pretty closely with Katie Taylor on that in school nutrition. And so her, you know, she's the one that made the recommendations for what the selections would be in this, and it's based off of how things are currently being done.
Correct. So I'm glad it's that the policy will specifically state that, though. So thank you. My question is on 8531. Okay. And I'm just curious, the terminology on that of economically needy children. I just don't know if that's the term I would use there. You know, you could say disadvantaged. You could. There's a lot of. Again, I'm not going to wordsmith you here. I just don't. When I read that, just something struck me. I don't know if I would like to use that term. That's all.
Perhaps because this is all set, you know, by federal regulations, maybe we could just choose to eligible students.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
The
because
language in there before was just needy, and so that
Yeah,
that's
I don't
what-
like that
that's
either.
how it was before. And
Yeah,
so
no, I
we were
understand.
trying to,
I mean, you're making it more descriptive, which I understand that. It just, again,
Yeah.
it just when I read it, I was just kind of like, I don't like having needy.
Yeah.
The needy part of it is the part I don't like.
The problem is finding a phrase that's going to be a little bit more explicit, because economically disadvantaged does not mean you qualify for free meal service. So we could wordsmith it a bit, but this is residing in policy too. This isn't something we're putting public facing.
I understand. When I read it, it's kind of, I don't know. I just
Can we check with Neola to see if anybody has modified that to a different format?
Yeah, it does say eligible in the next paragraph. Yes, I will definitely check on that. And then currently, right now, we obviously are a CEP district, so we don't have the free and reduced price lunches currently. But we still have this policy because there may be a time where we do.
For 2 years. For 2 more years. We were lucky to get our application renewed and extended. If we qualify, it'll extend again, but we'll wait to see what the federal government does with that program.
That was my only point. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions on that one?
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I had two. One is, I have to go back up and find it, where it talks about, and I, yes, on the, sorry, on 8,500.
Okay.
On page 2, towards the bottom, school breakfast, we selected option 1, which at the end of it talks about the bus less than 15 minutes before the first bell rings. But then if you go down after option 2, it has that same sentence again. Is that just duplicative, or is there a reason that's in there?
So are we talking, so option 1, we selected that, and then option 2, you're saying the last line of the green in option 2?
Yes. I don't know if that's part of option 2 or if we're just.
Yeah, that's part of option 2.
Okay, got it. Which is what we're not selecting.
Right, so that same sentence is
It's just, is in both. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure it wasn't in there twice. And then the other one was, is there a reason that we're not, that will allow the sale of other foods 30 minutes after lunch periods and not 30 minutes before? For clubs and things like that, like that they can't sell things before school?
Actually, if I recall the rule correctly, and it's, again, things sometimes change when you're not paying attention to it, I believe the rule is 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after.
So it looks like what we selected is
Just 30 minutes after? Please come down, Katie. Introduce yourself too, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Katie Taylor, Director of School Nutrition. The current rule is if it meets the Smart Snack compliance, it's 30 minutes after the bell until till midnight the night before. So it's just during that time frame.
Is there a reason that we wouldn't allow it 30-minute where they could sell things before school, whether it's smoothies or?
Again, it's just USDA guidelines. If it's not Smart Snack compliant, at midnight we have to stop selling until.
Could you ask your question again, though? I didn't follow that last part.
Yeah, so on page 3, and then it bleeds over to 4, it gives the options. Option 1 is for 30 minutes. You can select how long beforehand. Option 2, it gives the option of adding the Food and Nutrition Services Department shall be the sole provider of food and beverage items sold in all schools until, and then we could select again 30 minutes before or.
Right, but give me your example again. What were you?
Like if we had a club that was wanting to do smoothies or something before school, is there a reason that they can do it after school and not before school, or is that just because?
If it's Smart Snack compliant, they can do it before.
They can. We just have to put in here that they can. So is there a reason that we can't, or is there a reason that we're not selecting to sell before school?
I would encourage the board to keep their language as vague as possible and just say 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. I'm uncomfortable that we don't put 30 minutes before because that defeats the same purpose, that kids won't buy their lunch because they'll buy a cookie or they'll buy a popcorn bag or they'll buy something else that's really not compliant with the process. So, and because the same thing happens too 30 minutes after. So if a kid realizes there's going to be a snack sale after lunch, are they going to spend their money in the cafeteria? They're going to spend it on the snack item. So 30 minutes to be 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after. What we have always told schools is that in order to be compliant, so long as what they're vending aligns with the requirements, they can sell coupon books, they can sell other things as fundraising opportunities, and then students can receive those after the gates close, after lunch is finalized with serving. The requirement really is you cannot direct compete with the food sales. And then also, we want to make sure we're adhering to the nutritional guidelines. So I think simply saying or modifying one of these to say 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after, let procedure guide the rest of this, not the policy. Because if the policy starts to become so prescriptive, then you don't give me the latitude to operate and create opportunities rather than having to come back to the board for a policy revision each time.
So currently, we say sold until 30 minutes following the last lunch period, but you want to add in there or 30 minutes before?
I would say 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after the student's lunch period. But I'd have to work with Katie to see if that's compliant.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Because a lunch period, if you wait till, if I have first lunch shift, and there's 6 lunch shifts at my school, which we do have in some schools, that's 2.5 hours I gotta wait. So that's not, I don't think that's the intent. The intent is to ensure that that child is not being marketed to and being sold, and I'm gonna exaggerate because this used to happen back in the day. The PTO decides that they're gonna bring in Papa John's Pizza. You can't sell that at the same time they're selling their lunch, but if you allow it to be sold immediately after lunch, that's the problem. So we created that 30-minute rule as a buffer, but telling kids they gotta wait 2.5 hours to participate in that fundraiser is probably not a great idea either. So that's what I'm saying, if we, let Katie and I work on that language a bit, and with Chad and Teresa, and see what we could do. But I think restricting it to 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after is really what we need to say, and not until the last lunch period is concluded, because that could be a lengthy time. And that's not really the intent. I think we can tighten it up a bit, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Katie, does that make sense? Okay.
And just as a matter of process, these policies today wouldn't come back for public hearing until December 9th. So there's time in there for us to work on that language before we have to actually advertise.
There are no further questions on those items. Thank you.
Thank you. And then.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Just have a couple more. Policy 9140 is our Citizens Advisory Committee's policy. And these policies, this policy is not updated on a specific statute. It's just reviewing of the policy templates and just adding some things in there that, that they noticed weren't in the policy. And so there's permission for committee members to appear at meetings electronically or virtually. And then clarification that these advisory committees will not interfere with the work of a school advisory council, which is our policy 2125, or the district advisory council, which is defined in policy 2128. It also adds the provision in there addressing Florida Sunshine Law, and then there's updated legal references in that policy. And then finally, questions?
Dr. Allen.
Yeah, just a minor one on the 9140. As it relates to our committee charge sheets, I don't know if this would pertain to that in any way, but our quorum standards, what are the quorum standards for, is there a standard in regards to online attendance compared to the face-to-face? Do you know? And that may be a question for Mr. Green.
Yeah, they're laid out in the charge sheets, or if they're silent, then it's the same requirements that the board would have. So it depends a little bit on how large the committee is, if it's 15 members, 12 members, what that quorum might be. But it might be good to be more explicit in the charge sheets with what exactly is a quorum, because sometimes the full membership might not be at a meeting, and when voting happens, it's important to make sure you've got the right quorum. So I didn't really answer your question. It depends on each committee and how many members it has. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And is there any requirement in regards to Sunshine, in regards to face-to-face within our advisory?
Not Sunshine, but the Robert's Rules of Order have requirements on whether, just like the board here, whether you can attend virtually or not. I would need to look at each committee to make sure that, to see what the rules are as far as virtual attendance, and whether that's even an option. All right.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So
Okay.
Thank you.
So that was one of the updates that we made to each one of the charge sheets. So a committee shall have regular meetings, additional meetings may occur as up needed. A quorum shall consist of 40% rounded to the next highest number of the existing voting members. And we did allow, and we do allow, similar to the board, we do allow for other members who are not physically present to participate and vote electronically with good reason why they could not be in attendance. So it's not something that we would allow a member to do consistently over time. There are expectations, and we'll just address that on a case-by-case basis. But that language was specifically added following the board action and the updates to the committee charge sheets.
All right. Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is that it?
Go ahead, Ms. Griffin.
Okay. And then our final policy that I'm bringing before you today is policy 9800. It's our charter school policy. And this policy is being significantly revised, but the bulk of the revisions revolve around removing portions of the policy that merely restate the statute. So the statute surrounding charter schools, Florida Statute 1002.33, in this policy, we would quote, or the policy would have just chunks of the statute in the policy. And so the goal is to just remove those portions of the policy and just reference the statute, which just, so when there's changes to the statute, it's not always changing every spot that it's listed in the policy, restating the statute. So that's a bulk of the strike-throughs that you're gonna see in there. And the additional revisions in the policy outside of that are from House Bills 443 and House Bill 1105. One that adds provisions to the Charter School Governing Board that were just requirements around landlords. And then there's a requirement that charter schools or contractors be provided access to the school district student information system unless prohibited by Florida or federal laws. And then a requirement that school boards provide charter schools coordinated screening and progress monitoring student results in the same manner that we provide to other public schools. And then a new funding section outlining the school board's responsibility to provide certain information to charter schools pertaining to shared revenues, by discretionary half-cent sales tax, surtax, voted district school operating millage, and non-voted district capital improvement millage. And if you noticed on the attachments, there were 2 copies of 9800 attached. Because of this, there's the green and red strike through, which we always provide, right? It lists all the new revisions, the things we're taking out in the policy. And then we also included like a clean copy just so that it was a little easier to read because there were so many changes to this policy. I know it gets hard to read when there's like a whole page of strike through. So that was just to be able to give you a clean copy of that. When you look at the clean copy, you may notice on one of the pages, there's like a random floating like number. That board doc just wouldn't allow us to delete that out, but it will be in post-production when Neola, before it goes live on our manual, it will be taken out. But that's with those 2 versions. It's the same policy, it's just one is clean, what it would look like, and then, are they not both on there?
The clean version's on.
Okay. Yeah, that's I thought we had both of them on there. That's a clerical error on my part. I will send you, so you guys have the clean copy, but not the, okay, I'll send you the green red strike through. So everything I said probably didn't make sense if you didn't see all the strike throughs, but I will get that to you here in a few minutes.
Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Superintendent. I mean, that was actually, one of my questions. I was looking for that.
Yeah,
strike-through
sorry, I don't
document.
know what, I thought I attached both. Maybe they were named the same and it didn't let me drag both. I'm not sure.
No worries. But in general, are we seeing anything that's going to require us to move forward with any charter agreement addendums or anything at this point as it relates to this policy? I was looking at our previous policy because I didn't have the strike-through one just to see how much additional language is in that policy. So that was the question I had. And I don't need an answer for it at this point, but I'm just wondering how much addendum are we seeing as it relates to this policy in regards to our current charter contracts?
And I will say that Candy Amato couldn't be here today because she's in Orlando, I think. And so she did want me to tell you guys, obviously, if you had questions that I couldn't answer, she's more than happy to answer that. You can reach out to her directly, or I can pass along those questions so that you can get it answered. She just wasn't able to be here today, but we needed to
All right, great, thank you.
keep the ball rolling.
I don't know that there's contractual changes, Chair Allen. Number one is the only one that would come to mind that potentially, depending on how explicit we get in our contractual agreements with charter schools as far as the operations, because what that stipulates, obviously, is that they can't serve as the board or chair. I think a lot of these will require notification for charter schools to ensure compliance. And so what we would do is send them the requirement as of its effective date, say, please provide us verification in writing of the following, and by virtue of that, submit a board roster, submit, so we can see that there's no conflicts there. The others really seem like more of a burden on the school district to provide certain information, so I don't know that those are contractually stipulated. And if they are, we're already in compliance, which with data sharing. I think the only one I had questions about is number 4. Number 3, requires that the school board provide a charter school coordinated screening and progress monitoring student results in the same manner as provided to other public schools in the district. I'm going to need to get some legal clarification on that, because, as you know, we have no rights or purview over their academics unless they show that they're not meeting expectations or it's a failing school. So I just need to get a little bit of clarification further about what that's going to entail, but we can provide you an update on that.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir. There are no further questions or comments.
Okay.
Oh, apologize. Ms. Wyatt.
I have one for when you're done on a policy that's not on there.
Yeah, that was my last policy for that, for today.
Okay.
Yep.
The September meeting, we talked about the residence area policy for redistricting school boards because state law changed 2023 that changes the window. I know Mr. Green sent me an email saying that that would be.
Yeah, I reached out to Neola on that, and so the way it was explained to me is the way it's written, it still allows for because I think we still had in there the
Odd numbered years.
odd numbered years and
To a number of days.
correct. And so they were looking at that, and so they were it was going to be included in one of their future updates is to probably just reference this, like use the exact statutory language maybe, reference that because it updated, but. So we'll bring that back.
Okay, so my question was going to be, is that something that we'll be voting on in October, or are we waiting to bring that back until it?
So that is still slated to be voted on. I'm trying to remember I feel like that's going to be voted on. Did we not already vote on it?
We had not at that point.
So I brought that in, I'm trying to remember.
It was September 9th, so we haven't had a board meeting since then.
I brought it on September 9th? Okay, so then it's going to be voted on October 28th.
October 28th.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're voting on it with not accurate statute?
Yeah, well, and Mr. Green, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't that, the way it's worded, it still lends itself to it's said in there the odd number years, but it's still correct. Like, it's not inaccurate, it's just not stated as clear as the statute.
Right, I think the current language was accurate as it read. Maybe not as clear as it could have been, but there wasn't a need for a change there.
Well, the statute would allow us to still modify it in January of a year that we have elections, whereas currently you couldn't modify it after December 31st in the odd year. So the new statute actually gives a little bit more of a buffer in timeline, which is why I just want to make sure we're not restricting ourselves any more than we already have any restrictions, so.
Okay. We can, we have a couple options that we can do with that. We can, like I said, it's slated for public hearing on October 28th, so we can vote on it as is. A board member can make a motion to change, during the public hearing, that board members can always make a motion to change that, or we could pull it. But I know Neola was looking at addressing it for a future update, so it's just whether we want to just pull it entirely and wait for that, or make our own revisions during public hearing.
Okay. I just know I probably won't be here on the 28th.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that I had the answers to that before I go out. So my preference would be to make sure we're not.
Join remotely.
Listen, if you want me to call in labor, I will. Don't put it past me. But so Ms. Field said no. Listen. But so, I mean, my preference would be to only update it once and to update it accurately, but that's me as one board member. So I don't know that we have to wait on Neola to get language. I would think we could reference the statute on our own, but that's just me. But I appreciate you giving an update.
Okay. So right now, it's still, it's on there, you know, it's on there for public hearing on the 28th. I can still make changes if that's what I'm asked to do. I just don't know.
Yeah, I think we just need to discuss that further with Mr. Davis and Mr. Green, just to make sure we're citing the appropriate sources and making the appropriate references, but absolutely. And then if any change is going to take place, the board just needs to be apprised
Right.
prior to their vote.
Because we've advertised it already, it's going to go on the agenda with the current language. We could,
I don't believe a Scribner's error, which is basically what this is. If we cited the wrong statutory reference, it does not change the totality of the policy. So
so the
that would be my position.
statute is still the same. It's just, it reads the way the old statute read versus the language reads what the old statute said versus the change that came in.
That's fine. We can talk about it. If it requires to be pulled, then we'll pull it. But I think we've duly noticed it, and so long as the substance of the policy is not changing, you can make an update, but we'll address that and give the board an update after this.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That's all
And
I
that
have.
concludes questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, next item before you is Mr. Chad Davis with our legislative platform update. Board members, you will note that yesterday I sent responses to several of your questions that were submitted. But Mr. Davis, who conferred with Wendy Dodge, who assists us in this regard, were the ones that drafted those responses. So if you have any follow-ups, he is prepared to address those at this time. Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
All right. Good morning, Chair Allen and members of the board. Ms. Dodge could not join us today because she is in Tallahassee representing us during the second committee week. So I am here to present our legislative platform. And before we begin, I just want to say thank you so much for your engagement. It's been great hearing the feedback as we prepared this, and I will get started here. The first 5 priorities that we're bringing, these are all related to student support and accountability. This is more of the substantive platform items, and then the next will be funding related. So the first one we have here is to allow the use of federally recognized high school equivalency assessment options to demonstrate the high school diploma equivalency in addition to the GED. Those two, the two that we have so far recognize the HiSET, the high school equivalency test, and the test assessing secondary completion as alternatives. 23 states already use these tests, so we would be just joining those states and being able to offer that offers a little more flexibility for students trying to meet that equivalency. Second, to allow the highest valid score from PM2 or PM3 to be used for school grades and for grade level promotion determinations. This just kind of gives students an extra opportunity to show their proficiency and they've already demonstrated that mastery and makes it a little bit easier for them, stabilizes the school accountability by reducing the single day test risk. Third is creating a rolling 3-year average growth rate to set a predictable annual cap on total new FES awards statewide for the subsequent fiscal year. This kind of ties in with what we've been dealing with this last year, where we've been trying to figure out what the funding should be. This might be able to help us out in that regards. Fourth, amend the Florida statutes and Department of Education policy to include PM1 and PM2 assessments for Algebra 1 to provide early and mid-year data. We know we've been struggling with algebra, so this would give us a little bit more data to try to address needs as we get them early on. And then fifth, allow acceleration points to be included in the high school grades calculation formula for students graduating with the Florida Seal of Fine Arts. This is a carryover from last year, so you may remember what that does. It would give us those acceleration points for all the students who qualify for that Seal of Fine Arts. Before I move on, are there any questions related to this? I did have those questions that you had submitted, and if you got the answers, I have that information here as well.
There are none.
Okay. Next, our funding priorities. These are actually all carryovers from last year. One will be to continue funding increases of at least 5% in the BSA, along with covering the cost of FRS increases, and continue to protect all students funded in the FEFP from having funding prorated. Two is to support increases, and that should say the Department of Education's recommended increases in mental health and transportation categoricals. And then for the ESE, the DOE is actually recommending less funding, but that's because more of those students are leaving us, but they're recommending an increased per student funding. So we would also support what they are recommending with that increased per student funding. Three is provide weighted VPK funding for students with disabilities to cover the additional costs of specialized teacher training and smaller specialized classrooms. And then four, continuing funding for the state academic tournament, which is something that we've been receiving each year in the budget. Any questions on those?
Ms. Miller.
Yes.
I sent some feedback on the funding number 2, and what you just said, I am not in agreement with. Not only do we need per allocation, but we cannot support a decrease in funding to exchange for that allocation, because the funding has always been limited from the federal government. We really don't know what's going to happen with it, but I think I understand where you're going with that, and I do want to make it more descriptive, because we started out, it wasn't suggested increases in mental health, ESC, guarantee, and transportation. What I suggested to the superintendent was something that was more measurable than just support. And I do like what you added at the beginning, but I would be cautious because realistically, if we were only getting 16% funding from the federal government for the last 25 years, to increase, our needs are all so great that keeps us in a deficit, that they need to increase that plus the student allocation. So I don't know how we should word it to support an increase, but not limit it to say that I'm in agreement to shortchanging one side and adding to the other. That's my input. Also, is there anything, and this might be for the superintendent, over the past few years, this is all great information, thank you. I think they're all great initiatives. A lot of this is very state driven, and it's good because we can join what other districts are doing for promoting these. But in the past, we've had some Polk specific asks. And other than every year asking for the state academic tournament, I really don't see a lot of Polk specific. So was there just not a need, or when compiling the list, we just decided that this was a better option to go? I guess that's a super neat question.
There's no list. We requested, we got no feedback. So this was holdover from last year's. We've been talking now for a month and a half about these things. We sent out the request. I believe y'all got some of the emails, also our cabinet level, and we've asked people for what their needs are, and we didn't hear anything back.
So we haven't had needs. In the past, we requested money for the farm that we're going to build out off Highway 60.
Well, that's different. That's an appropriation request, and that's not included here in funding. So I work separately with Ms. Dodge to submit our requests for appropriations.
Okay.
Those are not typically covered here.
It's been covered in the past. So at least we have the ask. They're just going to be shared differently.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. All right.
Dr. Allen.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to maybe a little bit there. I appreciate the student support and accountability in number 1. This was an item that birthed from a local discussion probably 3-4 years ago. So I thought it was appropriate to resubmit that this year. And so I appreciate even the language cleanup comparative to what I had submitted specifically around that one. So I think in a time where we value choice at the state level, I think that's a really good initiative that does benefit us locally in several different places, East area, West area, adult school in particular, and I think a lot of the adult learning that's happening across our county within other areas, nonprofit work as well. So I appreciate that one being there. Speaking of the student support and accountability in number 5, as it relates to accountability points for the Florida Seal of Fine Arts, I'm wondering, and I'm in favor of that for sure, just because it'd be good to see that from a quantitative standpoint, you know, the success of our students in this particular area. I think this is a good thing for us to see. I'm wondering, though, how it relates to our funding, because if we've moved to the categorical now as it relates to our accelerated points, do we get a funding mechanism off of that? Do you know, the superintendent now? Based on the Florida Seal of Fine Arts, if we ask for acceleration points on that, I think now the way that it works is we have the categorical, correct, on acceleration points, rather than the calculation formula that we previously had. And that change happened last session. I'm just maybe seeking clarification on that, because I'm wondering, like, is there a value of seeing it from a funding mechanism, or could it be considered we just, you know, we're wanting to be able to track the success of these initiatives? Because I could definitely see the value of adding it in that column in the FTE reports that we get. But I think with it being a categorical now, it's sort of filtering through our base student allocation, right? Not sure if you can answer that, Superintendent.
I'm tracking, I think, a little bit, but I think our request is more focused on why aren't we getting acceleration points for students who are earning that seal?
Yeah.
And we should. We should get it for a seal of biliteracy. We should get it for all of those seals, because those are exceptions or exceptional students that go above and beyond graduation requirements. So the request is, why is that not being recognized? To the point of generating additional funding, that's another question we could be asking as well. Why shouldn't that be included in CAPE funding and those kinds of other funding mechanisms for AB, ICE, or ACE, excuse me, and IB programs? So we could definitely explore that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I'm still trying to understand the change where we went from as a weighted mechanism for our accelerated to the categorical. So, right, so we're noting in the funding, we're supporting increases in mental health, ESE guaranteed, and transportation categoricals. So I want to make sure that we're supporting the accelerated categorical moving forward now, because I would say we as a district have benefited in a dramatic way as it relates to the accelerated and the categorical comparative to the weighted mechanism. So, and I'm not sure how other districts are seeing their acceleration categorical comparative to how they were earning funding as it relates to their weighted mechanism. So all that to say, I would be in support of the way that the acceleration categorical is currently now in state statute.
are you asking that we add that to the request for an increase in funding?
Well, I'm not sure if I would say increase because, you know, I would say that we did receive an increase when we transitioned from the weighted to the categorical. But I want to make sure that we are sustaining and protecting that because I could see maybe other districts evaluating it differently.
We could add that as, but it wouldn't be a funding. It would, because it would be under more support, student support and accountability, because that item number 2 is specific to requesting an increased funding allocation. So if your interest and the board's interest is to have that as essentially a statement of affirmation saying we'd like to see stability in this and the continuance of it, we can add that to the overall legislative priorities, but I wouldn't put it there. In fact, I'm even a little uncomfortable after listening to Ms. Miller's feedback again. I don't know that those shouldn't be broken out into separate requests rather than trying to lump sum the 3 topics under one. So we can definitely explore that because I think Ms. Miller is getting to a very specific issue, which is is this a real trade-off? Are we going to benefit? Are students going to benefit? You know, what's the rationale behind it? So can we better address that increased request for exceptional student education? Transportation has always been an issue. Transportation is woefully underfunded and has a huge impact on our operational budget each and every year as a result. So, but let us explore that with Ms. Dodge. And absolutely, if that can be just added to the top as far as one of our overall requests, we can do that.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. Going off what Ms. Miller was saying, I would encourage us to include our appropriations requests in our legislative platform. They have been included in the past. I just went back and looked at 2022 through 25. I know last year we had money that we were looking at for the modular unit for East Polk Health Clinic. But I think it's important that we're also, as a board, looking at those and approving those as part of our legislative platform. So if you could send those, what those requests are.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you misunderstood. That's not to say that the board wouldn't be included, but we've not finalized that list because a lot of our initiatives have been met. We've asked for a great deal of money for BizTown. We received it. We asked for money for Homeland. We received it. We did not. We got denied for that project in particular you just mentioned. We've received millions of dollars for the generators. There isn't much left to request appropriations for. Really, what we need is maintenance of our current budget or an expansion of our current budget to best support what we have in place. But Ms. Dodge and I spoke on the phone the other day about what would be our legislative appropriation requests, and so I have to meet with staff and finalize that. But yes, that will come back before the board.
Okay. Because the modulars, I mean, I don't know if it was outright denied for a reason, but I think most of what we've brought as appropriation requests have taken us a couple of years to get. I know BizTown in particular, I think we ran, Representative Bell ran at least 3 years before we got it, maybe 4 years before we got it. So I just want to make sure we're not asking for nothing other than the $250,000 for.
Yeah, I think I'd like to have an offline conversation with board members with each of you to explain why that item's not on there again this year. We might find ourselves in a situation where we could get an appropriation only to have to turn around and give it back. So there's details there that I can't share here because we're not far enough along in the insurance committee conversations, and there's an implication there, but I can explain that.
Thank you.
Mr. Sharpless.
Want to thank you for answering my questions that I submitted to Superintendent Hyde. I got to tell you, I think that our strongest item on the whole thing is student support and accountability, number one. I think it's well articulated. I think it's defensible. I think we have to be strategic when we go up to Tallahassee. I think framing it in a way that invokes Florida's competition with other states' education systems is really a good framing for pushing something like this through. I think it has a lot of bipartisan appeal and aligns with our current administration's workforce development goals. So I think number one is a home run. I also think funding, number one, you have to ask for increase in the base student allocation. If you're not asking, this won't be given. So we have to do that. One question I had that was answered through email was on the cost of implementing PM 1 and 2 for Algebra 1. And the reason I asked that, it has to do with student support and accountability, number 4. I think that's going to be the first question that's asked. So we have to, I'm not necessarily saying we need to not have it on our priorities. However, when we go to Tallahassee, we're going to be prepared to have some sort of, answer to that, because when we're meeting with legislators, they're going to ask, how much is this going to cost? And I know we may not have that answer, but hopefully maybe, talking to DOE, we can potentially get an answer for that. I just know in a fiscally conservative legislature, they're going to ask that question because we're adding, potentially, and I'm hoping it's not a big cost, but that's just something I think we need to have an answer for. Other things here. I did ask the question that was answered, should any of these items be held for future years? And the reason I asked that, having these 9 things going up there is, I feel like the less number of items we have, the more we can be hyper focused on those, and we can try to get those passed. I would like to. I don't have the data for this, but when we have, what is our success rate of advocacy when we have per item? I don't know. That's just a concern that comes up in my head. Having these 9 items on there, is that too much? Is that too little? I don't know. I can't give you an answer. So I'm not saying to pull anything. I'm just saying I think having a hyper focus would be beneficial. Let me see here. I think the one that's going to get the most potential pushback is going to be student support and accountability number 3 with the rolling caps. I like that. The growth rate, I personally like that, but, with the makeup of our legislature, I don't know how successful we'll be with that, but maybe, I don't know, we'll have to try. Right, Superintendent Hyde? If you don't try, it can't be done.
No,
So-
it has polled favorably with many legislators, actually.
Okay, excellent. Glad to hear that.
They are frustrated by their perception of the lack of accountability data that they're receiving, the number of students who are being dually charged, whether they get a scholarship and then the district either received FTE or the district received no FTE while the student's family still held on to a scholarship. So I think there's an opportunity here. And again, like I said, we've polled this with several legislators.
So I think
received well.
then going back to my other question about coalition partners, I think that's going to be critical for something like that, for us to have coalition partners across the state that are doing the same thing. I know in FSBA, there's been some discussion around that platform on the scholarships in general, and so it's going to be important to have partnerships there because just our voicing that, I don't think is going to be enough to push it over the finish line. Is what I'm trying to say.
We're not alone in this.
Okay. I would assume so, but I even think, potentially getting a partner like Step Up on board with this, I think would be good for them if we're both saying the same message that, hey, we need to make sure we're being accountable for these scholarships. I think that's going to hold much more weight than just the district. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Other than that, I think it's a pretty good legislative platform. Kudos to you and Ms. Dodge and all the fellow board members and superintendent. Thank you.
If I can offer a little insight on that, some items we know will take multiple years. The Fine Arts Seal is one of those that took a few years. So sometimes you put things on there just to keep the conversation going. And then in my experience from working in Tallahassee, the priority sheets, what usually you get is like a 1 page. If you can fit it all on 1 page, that's about how much you want. You don't want much more than that. And our documents usually look really sharp, full of color. It's folded in half and it's got all of the stuff right there. So I think it's probably, it's not going to get lost in the shuffle. I don't think we're asking too much. I do think we have items on there that'll appeal to different legislators and their interests. So it's good to have something on there that might catch their attention. But also some of those things that we don't think will get done this year, by keeping them on this year, it just keeps that conversation going. And you never know what's going to strike and when they decide, this is the year to make something happen.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Keys.
Yeah, I'll keep my comment short. Just really happy about how this is put together on the student support and accountability items 2, 4, and 5. And thank you for Dr. Allen for mentioning that. And I was curious too how that attributes to funding and if there was something we could kind of tie to that there. But I think and Mr. Sharpless, which you brought up too about point number 3, I'm glad to hear that we have buy-in from other districts because I felt like that was going to be an uphill climb as well, especially with the popularity that's had in the legislature here of recent years. But I think it's very well put together. And then again, on the funding side, number 1, with Mr. Sharpless, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think we need to keep striving for that as funding the way it is in Polk County and making sure that we're moving forward. But all said, well put together. Excited to see that we've got something that we can speak intelligently on and start to advocate for. And I think I'll sum it up with this is we all realize this is a long game, right? These initiatives carry out far beyond it's unfortunately most of the time that this board is sitting here. But to put them out, to advertise them, I think is great, and that way we can all get behind them and start advocating for. So thank you.
Ms. Miller?
I think I want to go back to that one we were talking about. And, you know, creating legislative platforms, and Chad knows this from all your years, so we're waiting to hear from your experience. But usually the vague statements get looked over quickly, but the action statement, when you're asking for something specific and the reason you're asking for it, gets a little bit more buy-in. That's been my experience. Even last week, watching that education subcommittee, you've got people on committees who have no you start naming acronyms and they're lost, but they want to know. So, you know, that ESE allocation can be easily sold to someone as we're helping, but if I had the district staff, you know, describe the deficit we're in and how another way of funding would be helpful, I think that would be more impactful. And maybe we need to decide which one is the climate or appetite for improvement. Maybe it won't be for all of those that we listed. Transportation is something that we need to be specific. We need them to understand that we start out millions of dollars in the hole because of the size of this county, because of how it's calculated. So I think we need to be more descriptive in the ask, because, you know, like we're told, you know, to make laws or rules for the masses, if they don't understand how it affects Polk, Broward and Dade transportation looks very different. Our friends in the Keys have large budgets. Like, I think we need to be very specific with the deficits in some of these areas and how it would benefit Polk if we changed how the funding mechanism worked. And I want to be very cautious of someone hearing that improving ESC is a you know, switch one for the other, because it's going to leave Polk County in the same position. So I'm looking forward to input on how you think that would be more successfully submitted.
So first, regarding appropriations, if when it comes to individual, excuse me, I keep bumping this, appropriation requests, we're still early in the process. Those deadlines are not until later on, probably in November, I think, when they have some of those deadlines. House and Senate have different deadlines for their appropriations requests. So those haven't been filed yet. So for us, you know, that's a meeting. We have to meet with the legislators, find a sponsor. So to request something we haven't even filed yet as an appropriation request, we wouldn't be able to have that on the list for today. And trying to get these priorities done by the end of this month, when committee weeks are spread out from September through December, we're trying to anticipate what we think we're going to be prioritizing before we've actually met that point in the committee weeks when we actually know where the direction is going, where we need to be focusing our energy. So there is a little give and take in trying to have a platform as early as possible and trying to have it all nailed down before we've actually started to hear the conversations and see the direction of the legislature. As far as trying to have more specific asks and how they affect, you know, that really does take more input and feedback from folks within the district, from yourselves. And so when we've been asking them, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I'm not an operations specialist in education. I don't know what we need transportation wise. All I know is to ask, and we sent that out. We've been talking about this now for 2 months. So unless it's brought to us, you know, we got some feedback from a couple of you. We got your ideas. We met and talked, and so we've followed up with the requests that we've been given. But, you know, Ms. Dodge, she's an outside contracted lobbyist. She's not here on a daily basis. She's not meeting with folks. I've sent out the ask. I'm not getting any response. So I don't know what else to do to make it more effective or what you're looking for, but I'd be happy to, you know, maybe Ms. Dodge and I can meet with you and get your ideas and see if we can come up with something a little more specific.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you, which is a good lead to my comments. You're absolutely right about Ms. Dodge. And I am sure that whatever is being proposed here, she's had conversation with a lot of people in Tallahassee, as well as with the superintendent and the team. And so I am sure that a lot of the items that we have here, other school districts are probably proposing the same thing. And I know that the Florida School Board Association is working on the platform as we speak. And in the past, we have always had our present platform when we discussed our proposed platform. And we've also had the Florida School Board Association platform. And then someone made the comment about the progress that we made from the previous year. I think all that would be good to have for review before we get the proposed platform. But I feel comfortable with what is before us because of the legwork that I am sure that's been done. I don't think this was just thrown together. I think that a lot of time and energy has been placed in it, and I think that it's doable. So I am okay with moving forward with whatever minor tweaks that might need to be made.
Ms. Wyatt, you were on there. Did you withdraw?
I will, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, Ms. Davis, there are no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Right. I do have one more slide, just a timeline to give you an idea. I think most of you are familiar with this. Committee weeks began last week. We're in the second week of committee weeks. We will be bringing back the platform to you for your final approval on October 28th. If you have some tweaks and things you want to see change, you can send those to us. You know, this is really not a policy, so it's not a rulemaking kind of a thing. So we can make those changes and circulate them around, get feedback, and make sure we have a finished product, hopefully October 28th. Hopefully, because Mr. Keys and I will be presenting October 29th at Inside PCPS on our platform. And then November 21st, that's when all bill drafts must be submitted into drafting. So if we have anything that's substantive for a bill, we need to make sure we have our sponsors lined up by then. By January 9th, all bills must be filed, and then regular session will begin January 13th. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Board members, the next item before you is Behavioral Interventions and Strategies presentation. This was a request from Board Member Miller that we go ahead and address this and outline in particular what supports are in place for both classroom teachers and for schools. So we have Mr. Butler, Denise Santos, Tammy Williams.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, board members and Superintendent Hyde and staff. So this presentation this morning is going to provide a continuum of supports across the district. That's why you see all of us here. We actually have been working with Division of Schools, with Specialized Services, our department, and wanted to kind of outline what we do within the whole division of learning support. And so as we support schools and we look at the multi-tiered system of supports and make sure that there's a clear understanding of the tiered interventions, and then Dr. Allen's role as well is to support the positive behavior intervention supports that are in the schools as well, to make sure that the foundation is set and that that's clear by the administrators and staff at the school level. I also wanted to address, Ms. Santos will go into a little more detail about it, but Mr. Hyde has also spoken in about students who have needs in the area of discipline or they need behavior supports to be successful. We're always looking at how students are accessing instruction. And so there are times when we may need to make sure there are evaluations that are done. And we want to make sure that there's an understanding. That comes from the Student Support Services Department, overseen by Ms. Scott. And then she also has social workers that can also support families as well in these areas. And then crossing over into behavior mental health supports, we also provide counseling to specific students based on their needs. And then there's also additional behavior supports provided from Ms. Santos's staff as well, with training and modeling in specific circumstances. So especially going into exceptional student education as well. We like to look at, exceptional student education students are general education students first. But we also have to make sure they're accessing instruction and being provided the additional support there. What we say prior to getting to Mr. Butler, having to address some of the alternative placements, we want to make sure, too, that we are recognizing the need to have individual education plan IEP meetings prior to a manifestation meeting, so that we're making sure that we're providing proactively providing the support as far as looking at the IEP to ensure the services are in place for the students. And so I just want to turn it over to Ms. Santos now. She'll go into a little bit more detail. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon now. Thank you for having us today. So today we're going to talk about behavior support within the district. This is what we're going to focus on today, key strategies and support. So we're going to have a real high-level overview of the multi-tier system of supports, or MTSS. We're going to look at our district's behavior support procedures, our crisis response, training and resources for site-based leaders, and some professional learning opportunities we have for our staff. Again, there's a very high-level review. Obviously, Dr. Allen and her team have provided more extensive professional learning on MTSS. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to go ahead and give you a little overview. So what is the goal of MTSS? To improve student outcomes, this is achieved by providing targeted support and adjusting interventions based on the student's evolving needs. It is a dynamic, responsive framework that ensures every child receives the support necessary to thrive academically and behaviorally. Today, we're going to focus on the behavior interventions within the MTSS framework. This is the inverted pyramid model. It reflects a shift in mindset. It goes from identifying students for intervention to ensuring that every student receives high-quality instruction and support. The elements are prevention-focused strategies, a student-centered approach, a collaborative culture where every educator shares responsibility, and real-world alignment to student needs. At Tier 1, which is at the top, we focus on strong core instruction, and then Tiers 2 and 3 provide increasingly intensive support based on data-driven decisions. Child study team. So one of the ways that schools support our students is through the child study teams. HB 1255 strengthens schools districts' ability to manage persistent student misconduct by expanding the role of child study teams addressing behavioral issues. Our CST helps identify and support students with serious or repeated behavioral concerns. The team is activated based on the district's criteria or when a single event is severe enough. CST brings together educators, administrators, and families to provide early, collaborative interventions and promote positive behavior and academic success. So PCPS are procedures. Each school has to establish a CST, a child study team. It's composed of administrators, counselors, any behavior support staff on campus, or any other support staff within their school. The student behavior is monitored weekly. Students with 3 combined referrals for serious misconduct are referred to the CST. Some of those serious misconduct include abusive language or conduct towards school staff, aggravated battery, bullying, fighting, with or without injury, inciting violence, and confrontations with school board employees. Students may also be referred immediately if a behavior warrants urgent attention. The district reviews data monthly and notifies schools of students meeting criteria. This year, schools have access to the discipline dashboard, which provides them with the information that the district reviews as to where the students are when it comes to the referrals. Parents are invited. They're a core member of this team. If they do not attend, we do document the outreach, but we do want them to be part of this discussion. And then meeting notes are shared with both parents and the regional superintendents. So now for behavioral supports in general, this is what the schools have access to. Behavior support procedures. This was created with, a couple of years ago, Mr. Green and the divisional schools team to basically provide the schools a guideline as to how do we get from school support to district support. And so the idea is that we build school level capacity, we streamline supports and request processes, we ensure consistency and clarity, and then we deliver timely and effective interventions for students with challenging behaviors. These are the steps that we're going to go through just to see what the schools go through to make sure that they get the support they need for their students. So step 1, the schools are going to identify the student and provide and review all the data components. So academic, behavioral, attendance, and any intervention data. So anything that has already been done, the team will come together and review that. Some of those records include discipline records, restraint data, maybe threat assessments. If they have a behavior intervention plan, any of that data is considered. Once the review is complete, then the school team can take some actions. Classroom observations are going to help the school leaders better understand both teaching practices and student behaviors across settings. The observations can help identify when students are most successful. One of the things that we always look at, where is it working, and how do we replicate it in other areas? And then whether teachers may benefit from additional training or coaching. The collected data is then shared with Division of Schools, where they together collaborate and review the data and determine the best next steps to support the student. Our Division of Schools team, they may conduct additional classroom observations and recommend more targeted actions. They may also collaborate directly with the district behavior support team to ensure appropriate interventions. So the district behavior support team, that is my team, and so I guess I own them. So our district behavior support team is organized by regions. So each is led by a senior manager of behavior, and then we also have academic behavior support teachers, and we also have access to mental health facilitators within regions. We try to align this way to make it easy to communicate between regionals and our senior managers. But we also work alongside our student services partners and our ESC partners to make sure that we provide a comprehensive support to our students. Once we are involved, we complete observations, and then we partner with the principals to create a case action plan. This is a tool that we use, that's a structured tool to identify what the student needs, coordinate targeted supports, and outlines our observations, our recommendations, and our interventions. And it also allows us to identify action steps and identify staff that's responsible for the steps. We meet with the schools monthly at minimum. It could be every 2 weeks depending on situation to determine if the plan that we created is working, determine if there's an implementation fidelity, if we need additional training for the staff. Those monthly meetings are very important. We invite ESC senior managers, we'll invite regional superintendents, the senior directors of DOS, and we also make sure that the ESC is represented, whether it's a facilitator, ESC facilitator, or it's a senior manager. So their input is very important in this process. And we monitor this, sorry guys, and we monitor this on a monthly basis, again, if not more often. We want to make sure that it's working. If it's not working and and we're not seeing success with the students, we will make changes as needed quickly. But we do monitor data. We make sure that everybody's aware of the data collection, tracking, and how to appropriately get that data to the people in the team. So one of the strategies that we do use is a behavior intervention plan. So a behavior intervention plan is a proactive strategy designed to address behaviors that disrupt learning, both the student and the classroom. It includes targeted interventions, supports, and teaching methods to help students replace challenging behaviors. It allows us to identify a replacement behavior that we can teach the student to engage in that behavior instead of the challenging behavior. And behavior intervention plans are for all students. Oftentimes, the thought is that it's only for students with disability, but a behavior intervention plan is for all students. One of the things that we always talk about with behavior intervention plan, that behavior intervention plan is for the adults, not the kids, because it's telling the adults what they need to do to help the student be successful and learn the replacement behaviors. Some of the main components for the behavior intervention plan, first and foremost, we want to know what that behavior looks like. What is the target behavior we're trying to decrease? What does that look like as far, is it open hand, closed hand? Oftentimes we'll get, well, they're off task. Well, what does that look like? It's very important the behavior intervention plan has that clear. The function, why are we doing the behavior? Oftentimes, if we don't pair the right intervention with the function, it's not going to be successful. And so we also have preventing strategies. Again, what does the adult do? What is the adult actions within this process to make the student successful? Replacement behavior. What is a behavior that, although it's not the expected behavior, is something that the student can do while they're learning the expected behavior instead of the challenging behavior? And then reinforcement. How are we reinforcing the student? Not every student gets reinforced the same way. So we make sure that we have the right reinforcement strategies listed for every student behavior intervention plan. And then crisis response protocol. If there is a situation where behavior escalates quickly, how do we address that crisis? How do we implement the protocols to make sure that we keep the students safe and the staff safe as well? There are times when we have immediate action is needed. And so we do have a crisis response. So when we look at when a student exhibits unsafe, aggressive, or escalating behavior that compromises the learning environment, our district behavior support team steps in. So it's a phone call, we go, we send who's available to make sure that the team that we are maintaining, we get this stabilized situation, ensure safety, and implement the escalation strategies. Oftentimes, the adults in the situation have a hard time seeing what's going on, so we step in, we help, we provide some support at the time to make sure stabilize the situation. Once we are able to stabilize the situation, after the fact, we are going to be meeting with the staff, and we're gonna debrief, and we're gonna look at the individual student intervention plan. Is there a behavior intervention plan? Is there a plan? If there's not, let's go ahead and create it. We also look at staff training. Is there a need for staff training for when this happens again? Our goal is to build that capacity at the school level. So while we're in there supporting a crisis situation, we're also modeling for the staff and saying, hey, this is how we can do this, and modeling our language and modeling the way that we interact with students. All right. So what have we provided, or what can we provide the schools? This is some of the staff, the support staff that is available. This is obviously not an extensive list. There's many more. There are other people that can come in and support. Behavior interventionists, that is a position that the schools it's a school-based decision to have this position. Currently, we have 32. I've been working with with Mr. Bruno and his team and Dr. Allen, on training the behavior interventionists, giving them a little more focused training to make sure that they're all at the same level. We found through surveys last year that they had different levels of skill sets. So we've been really focused on them. We do have 32 currently, and that is a school-based decision. The rest of the staff listed here is district support. And the one thing, and again, the numbers differ between vacancies and who's on place. But this staff, they cover multiple schools. So MTSS, PBIS facilitators, there's 6 of them for all of our schools. So they have to share, they have multiple schools. Same thing with the coaches. The academic behavior support teachers, those are the ones that sit under my department. And then you have your mental health providers, which sit both during student services and with behavior mental health. But they do have multiple schools, but they each play a part within this behavior support. Because we may be able to provide, de-escalate a student enough to be able to go have a conversation and get our mental health provider to come in and maybe continue that conversation, talk about some strategies, instead of, engaging in that challenging behavior. So all of these people work together, constant communication on how do we support our students during a crisis. So administrators have received some of this training, threat management training. That is something that is ongoing. Florida changed into the new model in January 2024. We have continued this process. We make sure that my department also sits our district threat management coordinator, and we ensure that everybody completes their training. We actually just completed all of the 60-day refresher requirement, where all the team members of the schools have to complete the refresher training. We make sure that we provide the one-on-one assistance to our school teams. So if there is a question, they do reach out to our team to make sure that they are clarified on what the process is, how we're supporting students through this process, and what their responsibilities are. We provide Summer Learning Leadership Academy. Principals and APs get updates on all this information as far as behavior support. ESE has presented during the summer leadership on maximizing roles for an effective IEP meeting. We have the new and novice cohort training for principals and AP. Beginning of the year training for APs and deans. They go over the review code of conduct. They talk about the process for alternative ed and expulsion. And they did a lot of reviewing with the child study team since that law did come over the summer. And then every other month, the AP trainings, they do have opinions on operations. They talk about discipline, behavior, threat management, ESE. And they also offer regional assistance per request for the APs and the deans, and that's Mr. Butler's department. For our teachers and our staff and our support staff, we do have some professional learning opportunities. We provide verbal intervention, and this is anything, verbal de-escalation is alongside the nonviolent crisis intervention, but is all the verbal de-escalation piece. That is a virtual training that's available to teachers. We have nonviolent crisis intervention. That is, every school should have a team in case there is a crisis and physical intervention is needed. This is a select group of staff that's selected by the school. Youth mental health first aid. I'm happy to report that we are, last year we were 84%. This is state mandated, but a lot of our schools are striving for 100% because it's just good training. It's a good training. A lot of staff find so many positive things. We've trained bus drivers. We've trained schools, and the feedback has always been that is amazing training, not because it was required or mandated, but just because it's just good information to be able to help our students. And then they do have PD on demand, addressing student behaviors. These are some of the things that we do offer. There are other times when we will do behavior 101 for a school. We'll do verbal intervention just for a school specifically. And if there's anything specific within a behavior intervention plan, we will do that as well for our schools. That's it. Questions?
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Denise and I have worked together a long time. I'll tell a good story where I watched her wrap her arms in pool noodles and get on a bus to help a kid on the spectrum who had trouble traveling on a bus. So thanks for being here today and going through that quick overview. I do have a few questions because over the years, our crisis response team has kind of changed. At one point, we had an orange team, I think it was called. I just have a couple of questions that maybe you can help with. So you've mentioned that those behavior support people they're district employees, or are they contracted employees?
So currently, everybody in my department, they're district employees.
Okay, so we have maybe other departments who have behavior services contracted.
At this time, we do not.
Oh, okay, well, that's,
We have different contracts with different support specific to classrooms,
okay.
but not in my team.
So the interventionists go out, the behavior analyst we employ, is that like I'm trying to figure out.
So we currently don't have any board certified behavior analysts on our
Okay.
department. We have our academic behavior support teachers, and they're the ones that go out and provide support in the classrooms.
Okay. The feedback, I love that you have some of this you've listed online because, when I have calls, the first question is, does the principal know what's happening? Have we made calls to the district? They have all of that readily accessible to them, and I just want to make sure I'm giving people accurate information. If I was a principal and I had a student in a classroom that was disruptive, ESE or not ESE, because all behavior, I tell all parents that labels do not matter, especially as they age with violent behavior. But there is a resource at the school to show these steps to get people to help.
Yes.
Okay, the feedback I have been given, and I just want to ask about the timeline from the class observation to a behavior intervention plan. Is there a timeline requirement for that? Can it be accelerated if there's an issue? How do you treat those cases?
So it's on a case-by-case basis because there are times where we do just act quickly and we're there within the day or the next day, depending on what's happening in the classroom, who's, the safety of the students and the school and the staff. And so we can quickly come up with, a very brief FBA, because remember, when we create a behavior intervention plan, we have to determine what the function is first. And so we do have some tools that allow us to do that pretty quickly based on observations and conversations. And so we do get in there. It could be a week. It just depends on the situation. And sometimes we just go ahead and implement interventions that we know have worked in the past sort of quickly just to sort of settle. And then we get more data as we're going through our observation to make sure that we really pinpoint the function.
Okay, my last question, you mentioned Mr. Green at the time had created a dashboard. Is that accessible, that dashboard you mentioned, is that accessible to admin and teachers, or is that just an admin?
So the dashboard actually was created this year. Mr.
Okay.
Green helped us create the behavior guidelines, and the dashboard actually belongs to Mr. Butler, so I'm gonna let him talk about that.
That was my last question. I just want to understand the dashboard.
So the dashboard is created for the administrators at the school. School APs, deans run their data on a weekly, if not daily, when they do process their referrals. Well, those 9 qualifying events, it gets kind of in the weeds when you start looking at 40 or 50 referrals during a week to figure out which kid had 2 of this and which one didn't have 3 of that. So we created a dashboard that actually gets updated each month to let the APs and the principal know, hey, if you haven't caught this kid and done a child study team on him yet, here's your list of students who actually qualify underneath our rubric. Here are the list of those. And then if you drop down further, we've also created, as part of that dashboard for the administrators, here's any kid with 5 or more referrals. Here's any kid on your campus with 10 or more cumulative referrals. Because let's be honest, if we've got a kid that's got 10 tardies, well, there's probably, we need to investigate what's going on there, even though it's not one of those 9 qualifying events for a, quote, true child study team. It still needs to be investigated. We still need to figure out what's going on and offer supports so that student can be successful.
Thank you, that's helpful. And you have good participation from principals with that dashboard, I'm assuming?
It's just recently been rolled out.
Okay.
It just rolled out.
And I'm going to give credit where credit's due. So hang on, Mr. Butler. This is Tracy Collins who did this, and Mr. Butler who did this, because for 2 years, I've initiated a requirement that schools report every quarter on any student who's received 10 or more disciplinary referrals. But more importantly, I don't care about the quantity of referrals. I care about whether or not that student's been referred for other evaluation or what they're doing to determine what's the issue, why is this kid developing a pattern of behavior. And so in order to best support that, they made the decision proactively to develop a dashboard so that they can monitor it, but also so their superintendent can monitor it on a regular basis. Because when student discipline issues are brought to my attention, and I see a student, for example, that just recently had 27 referrals in a single year for classroom disruption, I'm going to be honest with you. That student, after the 3rd classroom disruption, it's no longer classroom disruption. It's gross insubordination, coded effectively, suspend the kid. That's it. Our goal is not to suspend students, but our goal is to change behaviors and protect the classroom so that other students can learn. And so I just had this conversation and reinforced it again with our assistant principals. Actually sent out a memo to all principals and assistant principals stipulating just that. I don't care what our numbers are. Our numbers should be up. If students are disrupting the classroom environment, yes. I clarified for them, can a student with an IEP be suspended more than 10 days? Absolutely they can, so long as it's not a manifestation of his or her disability, with the caveat that if a new pattern is developing, so let's say a student has an IEP for ADHD or for something like that, but all of a sudden we now notice this kid has 4 referrals or 5 referrals for fighting. That student has to be referred for reevaluation because I don't believe the IEP accurately is capturing what's going on. And so now we can't keep punitively punishing a student if we've not put the right interventions in place. We also clarified, and that's why I made sure I was intentional this morning to bring up the BIP, the Behavior Intervention Plan, because a lot of our schools, again, in talking with administrators, how many of them understood that a student who does not have an IEP or a 504 can be issued a BIP? And there were those that said no. Yes, they can. It's for every child. It's not restricted to a child with a disability or a 504. It's an intentional practice to make sure that we're correcting behaviors, but we're putting the right steps in place. And our numbers are our numbers, and they're not inflated. They're not high compared to the 7-8-year or 10-year average. And I'll give you an example of an area that while there was a recent media article that alleged this huge percentage of increase in disciplinary events, we've talked about this before. If you want to grab someone's attention, misuse the data. Because if you go from 0 to 1, that's a 100% increase. I'm not going to panic about that. I care about the actual number, not the percentage. I also care that some of our data is not being calculated or, entered correctly. And I was very happy to see that in our recent trainings we're reemphasizing that, because the definition for an aggravated battery is a serious felony offense that involves an intentional battery with an aggravating factor, such as causing great bodily harm, permanent disability, permanent disfigurement, or use of a deadly weapon. And yet we have people coding it as aggravated battery rather than a simple battery. So we've got to be better at making sure that when we're entering data, we're entering the right data. By the way, over the last 7 years, aggravated batteries are actually down. And so it's important to look at the actual numbers and not allow someone to skew or inflate the data for their own personal benefit to mislead people. And so I'll take a strong position on this because our data is very good when it comes to student discipline. And if someone says, well, you have too many offenses you're reporting, I would rather be the school district that over-reports Successor than to be a school district that reports nothing. And I don't know, Brett, if you remember the number that Ricky used in the training the other day, but he used another school district as an example and said, how is it Polk County has 116,000 kids and we had X number of events, but this district that's 3 times as large as Polk County had 3. It all comes down to honesty and integrity and how you're reporting data. And so we've got to do a better job there. But I would tell you, we put a lot of things in place, and staff, you will recall, board members, because you were copied on this, I shared the commissioner's memo with staff at the beginning of the year, based off his expectation, his mandate to do so. The Teacher Bill of Rights outlines exactly what teachers and staff can do if they feel that a student's disrupting their classroom, and what rights they have if they feel that it's not being addressed fully. So I think the team's put together a great thing. We still have Orange Team. Our threat assessments, for example, when you look at our student discipline data, one in particular, the 4 highest that we have, when you look at percentage of increase, the 4 largest that we have is arson, drug use and possession, threats and intimidation, and tobacco. So when you look at the actual numbers, I will tell you that threats and intimidation is the one that has the most statistically significant increase in total number of events. Why do you think that is? Because we took a strong stance 3 years ago that every child that comes on campus and makes a verbal threat or a written threat or an online threat will be assessed, because we never know. I understand the argument, well, some of these kids are elementary school kids, they don't know what they're saying. They're just saying it because they're angry. Do we have the luxury of taking that chance any longer? We do not. So our position and that of our sheriff is we would rather intervene now, determine there is no credible threat, but put that student on a threat assessment team so we can continually monitor that issue. But that's why the number's up. It's not because there's actual threats. Our numbers for aggravated battery are absolutely misrepresented. So this is a training issue, it's a data cataloging issue, but the systems have to be in place to better support schools. Had this long conversation yesterday with Ms. Collins. And what I appreciate about Ms. Collins is she'll say things that she knows I'm not going to want to hear, but she says them. And then we argue them through, or talk them through. We should say talk them through. No, she's not. Sometimes she's right. 50-50. I'll give her 50-50. But there are protocols that we used to have in place that we don't have in place right now. And one of those is the district review for discipline. And bringing that back is, Ms. Rouse is actively working on that. The other thing that we're working on is an intermediary step for our students with exceptionalities. We need to have a placement option for students who are demonstrating a new pattern of behavior, because we can institute a 45-day removal, but that requires services. And so we got to make sure that we have a place, an alternative setting we can send those students to while they're being reevaluated, whatever the process is going to be. For those of you in the district a long time, we used to call it countywide. You dismantled that program. Ms. Bird dismantled that program, rightfully so.
Good reason. Yeah.
For very good reasons, and I'm not going to go into that here. So we are right now in the process of developing what might that look like again, and what are the safeguards we'll put in place to make sure we don't make those same mistakes that were made previously. Or let me rephrase that, to allow the program to evolve into something it was never intended to be, and best support our students in need. So there are strategies both current and in the works. So I wanted to go ahead and address the data piece too, because I know that's been an ongoing conversation out there with individuals, but the data does not support the argument or the narrative that's being woven out there. So
I'm still the current speaker.
you are.
No, thank you for presenting more. You can hear or respond to different reports or even different inquiries, but I think it's important that it's recorded what the process is, and that principals can, because I can't chase down every singular issues, but I can say we have a process. It's readily accessible. You can find it here. Your admin should find it here. I think that's what's most important. And I also think that being very, we can what do we want to, I want to try to say this without, well, I'm just going to say it. ESC behavior is not the same as gen ed behavior. All behavior is under one roof. There are instances where it blurs and it crosses lines, and there are certain behaviors, no matter your label, are very significant and are treated and should be treated that way. In my meeting last week with Grady, we did discuss, and he was very aware of our numbers and how we are now having to code things, and he agrees with that, which I do as well. I think behavior could be a discussion for all day because it is very different. It looks different for a kindergartner who's not yet been diagnosed with maybe some kind of disability than a kindergartner who comes from an environment where you can cuss a teacher out and not be penalized for that. That's two completely different students. But behavior is communication. And I think the unintended consequence of choice, the unintended consequence is when I was a teacher 100 years ago, you may have had one or two kids in your classroom that needed support. My regular school, Title I schools, they have majority, 40% in their class may need support, 60% in their class may need supports. And I think having a tool for them to use to find out what those supports are important. So I think today was important for a lot of people, especially our staff. So I appreciate you presenting, and it might have brought about a lot of questions. I have a few, but we're not going to continue today. We can meet separately on those. But I appreciate Mr. Butler being here because he also has to deal with differentiating between what a disability looks like, what a manifestation, and what that means when we call those meetings. So thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I see no further questions or comments.
Thank you.
Last item, Mr. Chair, was an information-only item on our Head Start Services report. Unless you have any further questions or concerns, I will turn the meeting over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. So now we turn to our board member comments, and just to give a couple thoughts here, I just want to say thank you to all board members for getting your evaluations submitted in a timely fashion. And at this point, I'm actually meeting with Ms. Matthews today, and then I'm scheduled to meet with Ms. Yvette and the superintendent next week to go over those evaluations. So I appreciate your work on that. Just wanted to draw attention to as well, last week, the FSBA Board of Directors met at the Orange County Technical College. And by the way, that's one of 5 of their technical centers in their district. I want to draw attention to that so the superintendent can hear that. But I've got several research documents and other information that you may find helpful. I'll submit that in my board comments during our next meeting. Some of the key topics was Orange County's extensive work around workforce housing initiatives. It's pretty interesting what their deputy superintendent had shared with us. And then we have the Texas Association of School Boards associations in as well, and they were sharing some of their initiatives with Diamond Communication on cell tower spaces on different school campuses for extra revenue generation. And then also there was extensive conversation around the recent rulings on the summary judgment in the Parnell versus Escambia County School Board case regarding a book removal. So there's some really good information, and I'll enclose that in my board comment category as far as the documents for our next meeting. And then as an update, Joe McGee, who is the legislative affairs lead with the FSBA, along with Kim McDougall, who's now with the Arrow Group, who the FSBA consults with in regards to the legislative platform across the state. They met on Friday afternoon after the Board of Directors met to solidify the legislative platform as well. So when that's solidified, you should get notification from FSBA representatives on that. So those are just a couple of my updates. So here's your opportunity if you have any updates to share with us as well before we end our meeting today. All right. Seeing no comments, we will now adjourn.